Mr. President, we are ready to begin the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Chicago Board of Education meeting. Today is April 22nd, 2020. We are holding today's meeting electronically via Zoom. I am Miguel del Valle on behalf of my fellow board members. Thank you for joining us today. Regular meeting of Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020 is hereby called to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Member Sotelo,
Here.
Member Truss,
Here.
Member Tad Breland,
Here.
Vice President Rivaluri,
Here.
Member Melendez,
Here.
Member Rome,
Here.
President Del Valle.
Here.
We have 7 members present. There is a quorum. I would also like to recognize Dr. Janice Jackson, our CEO, Joseph Moriarty, our General Counsel, Latanya McDade, our Chief Education Officer, Arnie Rivera, our Chief Operating Officer, and Joshua Torres, our Honorary Student Board Member. Thank you.
Once again, good morning to all our board members and our staff, and all of those who are participating online via Zoom. I appreciate your participation. Last month, we had our first virtual board meeting, and it went smoothly. In fact, it went so smoothly that we were contacted by 6 different entities, 4 city agencies and 2 outside Illinois, looking to learn from our virtual board meeting model. I'd like to take a minute to thank the team at CPS who did such a great job running that meeting. Susan Naranjos and Estela Beltran from the board office, Marty McGuire, Albert Ludi, and Aiden Gavura from the teaching and learning. And of course, that doesn't mean that we won't have any glitches in the future, but we'll take it one meeting at a time. And hopefully this one will go as smoothly as the last one. I would also like to directly address a concern I've heard about our reduced public participation speakers. Since the board is operating under emergency guidelines that allow us to conduct essential business while taking appropriate measures to mitigate the contagion and spread of COVID-19 and promote expeditious public meetings that will allow board members, the CEO and the chief education officer and other officers of the school district to maximize the time spent directly addressing the needs of students and families. While it is certainly important to include some public comment, our past standard of 60 participants would both directly conflict with the goal of having expeditious meetings and would also require the public to be on hold, waiting to speak for as much as 2 to 3 hours at a time. Even with 15 people, we had people on the phone for a full hour waiting for their turn to speak. And we also had people who had not signed up through public comment try to gain access to speak. This virtual format is not ideal. Certainly it's not our preference, especially in terms of providing access to the public. We're anxious to get back to being able to hear from 60 individuals and having public participation last over 2 hours. And of course, I think all board members feel the same. Recognizing that board members have been holding frequent office hours, a total of 16 separate office hour appointments since our last board meeting. And we have provided a new email address where the public can write to the board and submit public comment at boe@cps.edu. In the time frame allowed. So we are accepting all public comments. And if the need for virtual meetings persists into May, and we hope it won't, but if it does persist into May, we will start publishing these comments for public consumption. So all public comments that are sent to us by way of email will be available for everyone to see if they're filed with us during the time frame allotted. The order of the meeting today will be as follows: CEO remarks, Chief Education Officer remarks, committee updates and announcements, public participation via electronic format. We will once again have 15 individuals and a half hour allotted. Discussion of public agenda items, vote on public agenda items, vote on executive session items, and then adjournment. We will start with our CEO, Dr. Janice Jackson, and her remarks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just checking to make sure my sound is good. All right, great. So on April 17th, Governor Pritzker announced that the in-person instruction had been suspended for all schools in the state of Illinois through the end of this school year. And while we understand that this is difficult news to hear, I want to reiterate the fact that we fully support the governor's decision to take the health and safety of all Illinoisans into consideration, and for both him and the mayor making this tough decision at this time. There's no doubt that the governor's stay-at-home order has saved lives. We know that to be true. And I also want to applaud Mayor Lightfoot for the innovative steps that she has taken to mitigate the damage of COVID-19 on the residents here in Chicago. There's been a focus on supporting both the business community as well as Chicago's most vulnerable populations, and CPS is proud to play a role in doing that. As residents of Illinois, we are fortunate to have such committed and forward-thinking leadership, both at the state and the city level at this time. So it's an honor to stand with the mayor and the governor and their decision. With that said, I know that parents need to fully understand that these decisions were not made lightly. And I also want them to know that the district is doing everything possible to make sure that we provide our students with access to a quality education given these challenging times. The curve is beginning to flatten, which means that our collective sacrifice is paying off. But until we get a decision to reopen schools, it's critically important that we all take advantage of the resources and the opportunities that the district has organized. One of the things that I wanted to highlight today is really all of the work and efforts that have been made by members of my staff to support the families throughout the city of Chicago. I'm grateful for having such a strong team here in CPS. Prior to COVID-19, I knew that, but obviously a lot of their leadership and more importantly, their heart continues to rise to the occasion so that we can support our families. A few special call outs. First, I want to acknowledge our nutrition services team. To date, they have distributed over 6 million meals to families throughout the city, and families can continue to access over 260 sites throughout the city where we are providing them with multiple days worth of food, no questions asked. I also want to lift up our facilities team that has done an amazing job executing our deep cleaning plan throughout the school. We're close to completing that in all of our schools, but the goal is to make sure that our classrooms and buildings are ready for learning, and more importantly, that they are safe for students and staff to return to the schools when that time comes. I also want to thank some of the people who work behind the scenes that don't often get talked about. First, our communications team, who has really prioritized regular communication to students and families in multiple languages and timely communication, which I think is critically important, but also the command center team, which is made up of a cross-functional group of people to answer questions from a variety, whatever questions parents can pose. And to date, we have fielded over 6,000 phone calls and emails about a variety of issues. And so I'm extremely grateful for all of these essential workers. And while they're not on the front lines like our nurses and first responders, they are making sacrifices every single day to support the students and families throughout Chicago. And I really want to commend them. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the incredible work of our school administrators and educators throughout the district. They have been working extremely hard, not only on day-to-day operations, which I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that are coming up, but really working to be responsive and flexible during this time. We will continue to share messages around our response to COVID, but we also want to make sure we don't lose the essence of the school system. The schools are a bright spot for so many of our students, and we know how important it is and how heartwarming it is to try to simulate as much human contact as possible so that people feel that connection, which is why we continue to share uplifting video messages, virtual story times that many of our teachers and educators are hosting throughout the city, as well as the parades that many of us have seen actually go viral. Those things that I know as a parent really warm my heart, and I know our educators are taking extra steps and really tapping into their creative side to connect with students and families. This is why I think it's important that we all take time to continue to show support for our teachers. Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up. It starts on Monday, May 4th. And like in years past, we want to do a really good job showing that support for our teachers. But because we can't interact with one another, so teachers will miss out on the baked goods and all the other treats that they might normally get in this situation, we can show our support on social media and in a variety of ways, because many of them are suffering through this, raising their own children, but also making sure that our students have access to education. And we applaud them for that. I am proud of the work that we're doing to meet these critical needs, but we know that the needs extend far beyond the basics, and we are turning our attention to that as a school system. We want to make sure that we go beyond just students acquiring the knowledge that they had learned up until March 16th, when the stay-at-home order was first put in place or enacted. We need our students to continue to grow and learn. We need them to continue to ask questions and be challenged on a regular basis. And despite the fact that our school buildings won't reopen this year, learning will not stop in CPS. Figuring out how to do that is something that will require effort and input from all of our stakeholders. We're hearing a lot from parents around remote learning, which I'm right there with you. We're hearing a lot from our teachers about how to manage that, and our principals are being really creative about creating those schedules. But we want people to know that we do intend to implement the robust remote learning programs through June 18th, which is the official last day of school. And so school will continue, and we really want to implore our parents to take advantage of all of the opportunities that we have in place to support them. Later, you're going to hear from our Chief Officer for Information Technology, who's going to talk about our efforts to distribute devices and also provide internet connectivity to our most vulnerable students. But in the meantime, we really want to encourage parents to participate, still access the parent portal. If you have not signed up, we encourage you to do that. It's really simple and easy. And if people have issues accessing that, they can always reach out to our hotline that we've provided. We also want parents to know that they can reach out to the school principal should they have questions via email, and our principals have been doing a really good job being responsive there. In a moment, Chief McDade will share some more specifics on the supports that we will be providing to students and families as it relates to remote learning, but the real message here is engagement. We want our students engaged on a daily basis. We have been able to stand up a remote learning program in a matter of weeks, something that would have ordinarily taken a long time. And we want to make sure that all of our students, in particular, our most vulnerable students, are taking advantage of that. As I've stated time and time again, academic growth remains a huge focus for us, but we also know that there are tremendous social and emotional needs that must be addressed, and we don't even know what many of those needs are because we're still in the midst of this. But what we are doing is making sure that our school counselors and social workers are accessible for our students and families. Our counselors have already started this work in engagement, prioritizing our 8th graders transitioning to high school and our seniors transitioning to post-secondary pathways. And we are looking forward to enacting our plan to have social workers support our students and families who may have needs that go beyond what we can do through remote learning. I just want to make sure that parents understand that we do have a full plan in place to support at this time, but also take into consideration that we're learning at the same time and creating opportunities in real time, and we appreciate their patience for that. Finally, the Student Health and Wellness Office has created a comprehensive set of resources related to COVID-19 that gives parents advice about how to talk about this and how to manage through this. We have circulated those via email, and they're available on our website, and we will recirculate those after today's meeting in case anybody wants to take a look at that. Finally, as we turn our attention to the day-to-day operations, we want to make sure that parents and students know that while we are in the midst of addressing COVID-19 and our response, we are beginning to plan for what the future school year will look like. By the end of this month, our principals will receive their budgets for the 2021 school year, and we look forward to assisting them with planning for another successful year at CPS, as we are a district that will continue to rise despite this. Finally, I'd like to ask the board to approve a chief officer recommendation today. We have identified Brian Stokes as the new chief officer for early childhood education. We're really excited about his candidacy. Brian comes to us from his role as Vice President of Early Learning Programs at Illinois Action for Children, and has also held prominent positions at Chicago's Gads Hill Center and inside the Illinois Governor's Office on Early Childhood Development. We think Brian has a wealth of experience, and he is a tireless advocate for early childhood education, and we believe he's the best fit at this time for Chicago Public Schools. We're thrilled to welcome Brian to CPS, and we look forward to the impact that he will make for our youngest learners here in the district. We really hope that the board approves his candidacy today. Mr. President, this concludes my prepared remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. We'll proceed with Chief McDade, our Chief Education Officer, who will also ask our Chief Information Officer, Phil DiBartolo, to share with us what's happening with the device distribution and other related matters. And then after that, then we'll open it up for questions and comments from board members. And I'd like to ask Phil to please stay with us because I'm sure we'll have questions for Phil as well. Chief McDade, please proceed.
Good morning, and thank you, President Del Valle. We are now 10 days into remote learning and well on our way to providing CPS students with the quality education they deserve. We know that nothing can replace the valuable experience our students receive in the classroom, but there is much that we can do to make learning at home a valuable experience. Our teachers and principals have really worked hard to design digital and non-digital lessons that will keep our students engaged and excited about their learning. And so we're continuing to provide the content packages for our non-digital students, which can be picked up at our various meal sites that are available throughout the city. These lessons are not one size fits all. They have been created to meet the unique needs of each school community and will continue to be adjusted as our remote learning system evolves. Learning at home is not easy, but it will help our students build important skills in many areas, including organization and problem solving. That said, we do not expect our children to travel this path alone, or our parents for that matter. This is why our teachers are maintaining daily office hours virtually, or by phone or email, to make sure that we're supporting those students who may not be digitally connected. They can give students and their parents the support and guidance they need. We also want all students to have equitable access to every learning opportunity, including the lessons and resources that are being provided digitally. To help us achieve that goal, our Information and Technology Services team is in the process of distributing more than 100,000 devices for our highest needs students. To provide an update on our device distribution, I would like to at this time invite our Chief Information Officer, Phil DiBartolo, to provide the board with an update on our progress to date in the efforts to distribute devices to our students.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Good morning.
Thank you, members of the board. Based on a survey of principals that ITS conducted in March, the district estimated that approximately 115,000 students would be in need of a device. In order to fulfill our commitment to equity and narrow the digital divide for our highest need students, the district pursued a strategy that leveraged both existing fleet and new investments in mobile devices. As of April 21st at 4 p.m., we can report that 54,866 devices from the existing school fleet have been distributed to students at 397 district managed schools and logged into our tracking system. The numbers here do not represent the full universe of devices that were distributed in recent weeks because some schools are still in the process of logging devices that have been provided to students. Once schools finish logging their device distribution, We fully expect the number of existing CPS devices provided to students will be in line with the 65,000 existing devices we anticipated distributing. In addition, our charter school partners have distributed 6,400 devices with plans for additional distributions to follow. I also want to provide an update on the new devices that are being purchased for students, since there are a number of moving pieces and some additional clarity might be helpful. In addition to the existing devices, we are also distributing approximately 53,000 new devices. When we announced remote learning, we anticipated distributing 37,000 new devices. Since that time, through additional dialogue with schools, we have recognized the need for an additional 16,000 devices, largely consisting of iPads and Windows-based laptops. As we are still in the midst of device deployment, we cannot preclude additional purchases and will continue to work with schools to ensure we close the device gap to every extent possible. In total, we are providing the following new devices to support our students during this challenging time: 5,000 Windows-based laptops, 16,700 iPads, 31,300 Chromebooks. These devices are being distributed to students at our highest need schools, and we are excited to announce that schools will begin receiving these devices today. Overall, we are in receipt of over 43,000 of the new devices, with the balance arriving over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Finally, the district recently announced the intent to distribute over 12,000 internet access devices for students in temporary living situations, who are also receiving a computing device as part of our larger distribution process. I'm also happy to report that we're able to support and address questions our parents had about device distribution. As of last week, our Parent Support Center was successfully able to track and close out more than 87% of the tickets they received from families. We know there will be bumps along the road as we go forward. We are committed to ensuring students and families have a high-quality remote learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your hard work, Phil, and for your diligence and your entire team. I know that at the start of March, you weren't expecting to have to develop a plan to buy, track, and deliver computers to 100,000 students. That really makes what you and your team have accomplished even that much more impressive. And we really appreciate all of your efforts to get devices in the hands of our students that need it the most. The third quarter closed Friday, April 17th. And parent-teacher conferences are scheduled for Wednesday, April 22nd for our elementary schools, and Thursday, April 23rd for our high schools. In lieu of the scheduled report card pickup days, report cards will be mailed to families, and our teachers are expected to hold remote office hours, so parents have an opportunity to discuss their child's third quarter grades and progress, both during the time students were in class as well as during the closure. Parents are also encouraged to utilize Parent Portal to monitor student progress throughout this period of remote learning. In light of the governor's extension of school closure, we will soon be sharing additional guidance for fourth quarter grading practices. Finally, I know a lot of families and stakeholders have been asking how the district is tracking student engagement and learning during this time. Through the remote learning plans, schools are tracking engagement and contacts with students at the school level. And we are in the process of developing a district-wide reporting protocol that we will be able to use and share additional data. I want to thank everyone who has been working so hard to make remote learning and device distribution a reality, beginning with our educators. Thanks to their tireless commitment, what should have taken years to create has been accomplished in a matter of weeks. Our teachers, principals, and support staff have been working around the clock to make sure CPS students have the tools they need to thrive, even while balancing responsibilities at home and caring for their own families in all new ways. Our families, too, must now balance their own responsibilities of work and home while helping to educate their own children. None of this is easy, and there is no roadmap for how we are to move forward. But as we've done since this journey began, the CPS family will work together to pull each other through, and we will all come out stronger as a CPS family when we get to the other side of this. Mr. President, this concludes my prepared remarks.
Thank you, Chief McDade and CEO Jackson and Phil. I appreciate your remarks. As you just indicated, we have no roadmap. I think that under the circumstances, I have to applaud all the leadership at CPS for the job that you've done thus far under some very, very difficult circumstances. But there is concern. We have lots of parents that have concerns. And so I'm sure my fellow board members will touch on some of those issues that have been raised. I'd like to start with Phil on the distribution of devices. At what point, and I know that we have ordered additional devices or in the process of ordering additional devices, but at what point will we be able to say that all students who needed a device have received one?
I think that's a great question. As stated earlier, we've received a preponderance of the new devices that we've ordered. I expect that, by the time we hit the end of next week, a good deal of those will be out the door. I do also expect, though, that some of the devices in the last round of orders won't be in our hands until the week after next. So I suspect that, that when the dust settles, we'll have a much better picture of this, obviously giving you interim updates, probably by the second week in May. If there are any delays in equipment delivery that are on forecast, I can certainly make those make you all very well aware of that. But my sense is that next week is going to be a very heavy distribution week to get those new devices into the hands of students. And then the week after that, if we're trailing with some of the deliveries, that's when we would probably have a much better idea as to whether we've hit the universe of 115,000 students that were originally forecast. What this doesn't account for, of course, is whether there are in fact a slight need above that number, or accounting for the fact that there might be some devices that we'll have to swap out in the event something gets broken. So I would say in aggregate, I would say at the end of next week we'll have a really good sense of where those new devices are. But the week after that would probably be when we'd have a really much finer notion as to where we are at against the 115.
But it's the availability of devices that have been ordered that takes us to the May 2nd.
That's correct. That's correct. We've been fortunate in that as a larger district, we have some buying power and we're able to expedite getting that equipment here. But I think there are a couple of orders that are in flight that might actually take a couple of weeks because of the dearth of equipment stateside. Because that obviously every district in the country is grabbing for the same devices.
And that is not within our control.
To an extent, that is outside of our control.
Okay. Well, distributing devices is one thing. What about families who don't have internet access, bandwidth?
That's a great question.
Have we come up with an estimate of the number of families, of households that would fall into that category?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly a difficult one to back into. We're using, to the best of our ability, some data points like the UIC Hardship Index and, surveys taken from principals to kind of get at the 115 number. I would expect that, the number of students without bandwidth would likely be in the same neighborhood or the same universe of students. However, unlike the devices where we had a very significant existing fleet to lean on to get to the 115, we don't have MiFi or hotspot devices at schools to give out. Yeah. So the gap that we would have to bridge would be almost the entirety of the 115. We focused on the homeless students, knowing full well that those students really could not take advantage of some of the free internet programs that are being offered, either for lack of a permanent household or ability to transport to one of the free Wi-Fi zones that we see popping up around the city. We also know that students in temporary living situations most likely can't take advantage of a smartphone with a data plan, which is also a backup for a lot of students who might be on the other side of the digital divide. So we made the investment for those students. What we're doing for the larger aggregate at this point are a couple of things. Obviously, we're trying to work with some of the local providers, our partners and other city agencies to make sure that folks know what free Wi-Fi or low-cost internet programs might be available from some of the larger providers, and also giving them guidance as to how to maybe leverage a smartphone with a data plan. Obviously, there are some really neat maps out there that give people access to where the free Wi-Fi is. But I would only caution that free Wi-Fi isn't necessarily a panacea, because right now there's no way for those service entities, at least at this point, to kind of block the non-educational traffic. So what we find is that as word gets out on free Wi-Fi, those types of channels typically get fairly saturated, and it diminishes the degree of performance that a student would need to have a truly meaningful experience through remote learning. So in summary, we're kind of taking the belt and suspenders approach and leveraging multiple channels, mostly, service providers and pieces that are already in place to bridge the rest of that gap.
Now, I've been told that there are some families, undocumented families, who have wanted to get internet access, but have been reluctant. In some cases, no credit history. Of course, no social security numbers. What kind of cooperation are we getting from the providers? Are they helping smooth the road for parents to be able to get access to that internet? I know Comcast is offering 60 days, I think it is, of free internet service, but you have to get connected. There's a process there. I know that the connection fee is being waived.
So
beyond
I think the companies have put some solid offerings out there. And what we're working on with other city partners and these providers directly is trying to bridge the gap of kind of really meeting people where they are. So for example, when there is a credit check that gets thrown into the mix, obviously that's something that's going to be disconcerting and potentially a deterrent to some families. So while I can't speak to specific progress on that front, I do know that there is an ongoing dialogue with a number of folks in the city with those providers to try to break down remaining barriers. What I can commit to is providing the board, with regular updates on that front. But anything above and beyond what's already been publicly offered by those providers isn't something I have a really good command to speak to at this point.
Right, and thank you for that point. That's an important point. We need the city and the state to help us facilitate a process that will make internet service available to these families during this crisis. And I think it requires a lot more cooperation from companies like Comcast and AT&T and others that, yes, are good companies, but this is a tough time. This is unprecedented, and in unprecedented times, you need to do things differently, even if it's temporarily for a 3 or 4 month period. And so I urge the city and the state to strongly encourage these internet service providers to service our families so that we don't end up with students that will never have access to the internet at home because of the inability to be able to qualify or to be able to follow whatever steps and procedures that are currently required. Thank you.
Can I ask
board members, please? Yes.
Can I ask a related question to the last point that President Del Valle was making? I think one of the things that this crisis has made clear is how important government is and how important the public sector is. And I think part of the frustration I think I hear President Del Valle saying is, like, in this moment, the fact that we're relying on, these private businesses to make particular arrangements. I wonder too if there's a larger role that the city and state could play here. And I ask this particularly in reference, and this is something as someone doing remote learning right now at the college level that we've been given, are these maps from the state of these new drive-up Wi-Fi hotspots that they're creating explicitly for remote learning. But when you look at the map, to my knowledge, there is only one site in the city of Chicago right now, which is at IIT. And I was wondering, clearly, Phil, you are not the state government, but I'm curious if you've had any conversations or know why the city of Chicago isn't being served as widely as the suburbs and downstate regions right now with the state organized Wi-Fi hotspots, because I think, as President Del Valle was saying, I think these are unprecedented times and it requires more than what the private sector I think is willing to do, right? But to leverage this moment to say that this is what is needed for our communities.
So I want to be sure that I'm a bit more crisp on one point. There are ongoing daily conversations with folks in city government who are actively working to to partner with these organizations to make sure that there is perhaps a more robust offering out there, for lack of a better descriptive. So I can tell you definitively, there are very regular conversations several times a day happening with folks in city government who are pushing very hard to make sure we do right by our students. I can't speak specifically to the site that you're referring to, although I was actually looking at it a bit earlier today. And it looked like there were a few spots beyond IAT. So I don't know if maybe I just looked at it the wrong way. But that is the type of map that I actually want to add to our existing parent materials. As you can imagine, this is somewhat of an iterative process. I've told folks, we're kind of building the plane as we fly. But anytime we find a resource like that, I'm just going to add that to the existing cadre of materials we're providing to our parents, because at this point, we'll take any and all help that we can get. But again, I want to be very clear that there's very significant effort coming, from other city partners and city leadership to make sure that we can extend, this coverage even more.
Yes, and I'm well aware of those efforts. I mean, the city and the mayor have worked very hard on these kinds of issues and continue to work very hard. But I guess what I'm saying is we need the companies, the private sector, to give more than what they've given thus far.
Understood, sir.
President Zavalla.
Board Member Breland, did you have another question?
Not on this point.
Okay. Board
President
Member
Zavalla?
Smith? Yes.
So first of all, Phil, thank you so much for this update to you and the team. Let me just make sure I got a couple of things right. So it looks like we already have over 90,000 devices ready to either already in home or in the schools. Did I get that right?
No, at this point, we have tracked 54,000 devices that have been logged as being in students' hands.
Correct. And then you got another 40,000 that came in new, right? And
Correct.
those are going to go to the schools. So
Correct.
we should have over 90,000 devices as of this week ready to be distributed to all the students that need it. And then we're waiting in the back order of all the new devices.
Yeah, specifically the Windows-based laptops is the order we're waiting.
Back order.
Big order we're waiting on.
Okay, great. So that puts us in a good position in terms of the demand that you had logged based on the input that you received on the first survey that you sent out. Obviously, that was an opt-in survey of people filling that survey out and having either the students or the parents fill it in so that the principal would know how many people would need it. So there could be more, right? There could be more that come in. And as we get more of that information, we should probably start planning so that we can also have more devices, because at the end of the day, we can never have enough devices in hand to make sure we fill those demands when people raise their hand. Okay. So thank you for doing that. More broadly, and I guess this question is probably going to be between you and Chief McDade. So again, thank you to the heroic efforts that all of you did to get remote learning up and started. There is no roadmap. So you guys have gone through a heroic process to get it up and running. And it's up and running now, but it's launched, right? It's launched with different practices. It doesn't mean that it's already working effectively. It doesn't mean that engagement is equal across the way. And so now we're going to need a lot of support to understand what practices are happening, and then making sure we learn from that, not only here within the district, but also learn from the world. Guess what? We're in this in a worldwide effort. There are countries throughout the world, and some of them already have started this. And I just ran across another article yesterday where I saw best practices from different parts of the world in terms of how are they understanding what's working, what's not, what kind of support do we need to do to make sure that we actually reached our most vulnerable students, right? Just putting a device in hand does not mean that they're appropriately using it. Putting a device in hand does not mean that they're accessing it. That does not mean that they're actually attending the video conferences they might be requested to attend, so that they can actually get some semblance of teaching and learning, right? So in terms of understanding kind of the best practice, Chief McDade, and not even best practice, what are the current practices? And then how do we understand more of the current state of remote learning? And then how do we continue to support the teachers, the students, the parents to improve it going forward?
One, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing and hearing in the field, and then have Phil kind of weigh in on some things that we are trying to capture from just the digital landscape in terms of the platform that the district is supporting around Google. But like you stated, all of the remote learning plans were individualized to meet the unique needs of the schools, and we're finding across the board, mixed results in terms of, it's been 1 week of remote learning, and so the first week really was getting acclimated, getting up and running. Talked to a teacher today that was saying the first week was really just trying to connect with all of the families and help families understand how to use the technology tools. And we've had professional development for teachers. So the first week was really operationalizing and trying to get going. And I think that has happened. And we're excited about where we're seeing that going in terms of teachers engaging and students getting connected, coupled with the fact that we were also giving out devices, right? And are still doing that. So some of the things that we're doing now is turning our attention to quality and looking at individual school plans. So the network chiefs across all of the networks, we've built out a rubric for looking at actual remote learning plans to see where schools that may have strong plans that could be exemplars to be shared with the district, as well as schools that need additional supports. Some other things that we have in place, all of our specialists throughout the district, whether it's the instructional support leaders within the networks to the content team specialists across the various academic officers, are available and at the ready to support school administrators as well as teachers. So they're hosting virtual professional learning sessions, virtual sessions on how to use the technology and modeling how to use the technology for delivering virtual lessons. So those kinds of supports are in place, and we're capturing what engagement looks like. So as I stated in my remarks earlier, we're now in the process of really trying to capture and define what is student engagement. What does that really mean? Because we want it to go well beyond just making a connection, but really learning what is happening by way of standards delivery and mastery for students throughout both review as well as new concepts. So that's all a learning process, and developing some protocols for how we capture that is really the focus right now for us. I do want Phil to talk a little bit just about some of the Google tools that we have, which we're seeing a lot of our teachers are using the Google tools, whether it's Google Classroom or Google Meets, which is good because that gives us a lot of information to learn what's happening by way of student engagement with assignments and who's logging in and tracking that. We don't have all of that operationalized or formalized in terms of reporting. We're trying to build all of that out now after we got the first week launched, but that's where we're headed, focused on one, quality. What does good remote learning or strong remote learning look like by way of exemplars to be able to share best practices across the district? And then two, really tracking student and teacher engagement during this time so that we can learn from that, as well as identify those students who may not be engaged so we can target supports for them moving forward, not just going into the summer, but going into the new year. So Phil, I don't know if you want to add anything just about some of our capability that we're trying to look at to determine how we track engagement.
Sure. Board Member Sotelo, just to kind of, dovetail off of what Chief McDade said, and what you mentioned earlier, that a device is just a device. A device isn't truly useful until, it's leveraged by a very talented teacher to make sure that the way that it's being used is aligned with, the educational mission. And what we haven't done, we're kind of playing more of a lagging role here. As Chief McDade mentioned, we're kind of still at a stage where we're trying to, define what good engagement looks like. What I can tell the board and what I can tell leadership is that we are able to, for our enterprise tools, get a very good degree of, kind of participation in what's happening in the district. However, we know that those enterprise tools aren't necessarily used in every single one of our classrooms. So what we're working on now is really trying to really get to, and quickly, the secret sauce as to how we can marry those things together and give our educators, our school leaders, our network leaders, our enterprise leaders, and of course the board, a better sense as to, whether the devices we've given out are being used, in the most efficient way possible. But again, we're still at a very formative stage here, and the bent that we try to take on the IT side is to make sure that anything that we provide by way of automated reporting is rooted in what's real and what's a really true indication of what's going on with our students. So typically our effort in the reporting is kind of lags a little bit, so that we're sure that our educators who are really in the lead role and the feedback from our principals and teachers is taken into account before we start to report out any types of numbers like that. But we do have some capacity to do so.
And then we'll be using that data once we're able to identify what data is reliable that we can use to determine what engagement looks like. We can then use that data to really identify when we see, who's not engaged, to what are the barriers that may exist and what supports may be needed, not just for students and families, but for educators as well. What additional training, support, resources may be needed to get people engaged at a high level. I will say that when we kicked off remote learning, just doing a comparison of what we saw and were able to capture in the district prior to the kickoff of our full remote learning plans, we have seen an uptick in terms of activity throughout the district. So that's very promising.
Mr. President, Board Member Truss. Mr.
Yes.
President?
Trust.
Yeah. Phil, could you also, getting back to those who need internet service, have with the call-ins, I'm guessing that there's also, we're also logging in how many families said that they don't have internet service and it needs it, correct?
So, Board Member Truss, I want to restate the question to make sure that I caught it correctly. You had asked if in the calls that we're getting, if we are making note of the percentage of parents that call that are calling about not having home internet access. Was that the question?
Yeah, just to get an idea, like, the population that doesn't have it. That way that we can say, okay, we get an idea who needs it, and we can try to connect those families with those service providers who are offering the different various offers.
No, I think using kind of the sample size that we get from parents is a reasonable facsimile for what we might be seeing, in the larger community, I think is a great way to go about it. We do have very specific ticket categories that we track. I unfortunately don't have those at my fingertips right now. We logged roughly 1,472 tickets last week. I can provide an update as to how many called on, hey, when their school is getting scheduled or whether they're getting a device or not, and how many may have called with a bandwidth constraint. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can follow up on that in fairly short order.
Okay, great. And also, Chief Education Officer McDade, I know that, after speaking with staff during our briefings, is that I'm confident in the mechanisms that the district as well as local schools have in place to continuously look at different ways that can really work with keeping our families engaged. But the Chief Education Officer McDade, could you talk about like the non-digital packets that have been distributed to the students and families at the food sites, like how, give us a description of that, and are students receiving any kind of feedback, or what's the setup for that for those who don't have internet access and they're using the paper lesson plan, the homework?
Setup for that is that we've continued, so we're regularly curating resources and putting together grade level content for grades K through 12 that's available at the food sites. And those are standards aligned that has project-based activities in there as well for families that last for 2 weeks. And so every 2 weeks we're developing more content that can be picked up. So throughout the closure, that'll be available to them. So they won't have, once they pick up nothing, once they go through that material, there's nothing left. We'll continue to have content available. What's happening with our non-digital students in terms of the guidance that was provided in our remote learning guidance document was that teachers are available both digital and non-digital. During their non-digital time of the day, that's the time for teachers to reach out to families, specifically those families who are non-digital, to talk through the work that students are doing answer questions, provide support with problems that they might be having with the lesson that is included in the packet. And so that's how we're supporting our non-digital students. And that's how they're getting that feedback through those conversations where teachers are reaching out by phone.
Yes.
So, President Del Valle, this is Board
Hi.
Member Melendez.
Yes,
Yes, I have I just want to thank the CPS team and Phil in particular for this tremendous effort to put out, to meet this crisis of remote learning that we're having. But I also wanted to just comment and get a response from Phil regarding the fact that the digital divide is not just about devices and internet, it's about quality of internet, because I know that many families are facing, they may have some kind of internet service that is very limited, that has very little quality of data, or a very limited amount of data use. And I would love to hear, what your thoughts are in regards to meeting that additional challenge to the many others that are part of this situation.
That's a great question. And I touched on it just very briefly in an earlier comment. I think there's been a large push and a lot of inquiry around kind of providing the types of maps that Board Member Todd Breland mentioned, about, hey, where do we have free Wi-Fi? We certainly kind of give people referrals whenever we find that those are available, but we don't hang our hat on that. Again, when you see the notion of a free Wi-Fi service, the practical reality is once that word gets out, there are a lot of folks who want to kind of piggyback on that service for, non-educational traffic. So you could say, the next round of conversation on this is talking to providers about potentially making sure that certain types of traffic are prioritized on their network during, say, the school day. But again, those are conversations that are still pretty much in flight. But I will tell you that yes, some internet access is not equal to all internet access, unfortunately. And we're doing our level best to work with existing partners, to talk to philanthropic funders who are very interested in helping to potentially solve this problem. But it's, as I said earlier, it's really going to take a multi-channel belt and suspenders approach to try to bridge as much of this gap as possible. I really wish that I could give the board, the public that's watching, a magic bullet or a panacea for this, but this is a problem that has existed for a very long time before COVID-19. And, we can just exercise as much diligence as we can to try to bridge that gap. But I would be remiss and wholly derelict of duty if I told this board that I can guarantee you that every single student that needs access is going to get it. We're just going to do the best that we can to close that gap. And when we do find outliers, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. Again, in really, there is no finish line here. We're going to continue to push as hard as we can push for as long as we can push until we reach as many students as we possibly can. That's a really good question, and I think that level of level setting is important.
And I have a follow-up. I think during our briefing before the meeting, we talked about the availability of mobile internet devices, and hotspots, and how realistic is it which have to be, I think, routed through some internet provider. Is that a realistic option that would maybe address the issue of quality of service, of internet service, and also maybe limit the traffic if the family has a device that they can plug in, a hotspot device that they can plug in?
Sure. So a couple different tracks there. If we take free Wi-Fi off the board and we're talking about, more either, hotspots or MiFi units as they're referred to, or kind of traditional home internet hookups, right? We're talking about traditional home internet hookups. There is obviously a huge barrier to entry, both in terms of sometimes, as one of the board members mentioned, there's an ask for a credit check. Some people might be leery about signing up for a service that says it's free for the first 2 months, then what happens after that? There is also a very physical concern about, hey, does someone have to actually walk into my home to get this done? And in a COVID-19 world, that's the serious challenge. On the hotspot side, while we were able to provide roughly 12,000 units for our students in temporary living situations. If we were to kind of extrapolate and say, okay, what if we wanted to try and grab another 90,000 to hit the rest of that gap? We do have a very significant dearth of available equipment stateside. So you have residual, effects of the fall tariff war. You have the COVID-19 manufacturing shutdown in China, which is where most of these devices are produced. And even though manufacturing has picked back up, there is a degree of latency as to when that equipment actually gets stateside. When it does get stateside, understand that, hospitals, first responders, law enforcement, there is a pecking order to where those devices go, and education is probably 4 or 5 on the list. I'm not going to argue with the fact that first responders at hospitals and whatnot are obviously a priority need. So yeah, there are certainly challenges there. I can tell you that it seems the supply chain has opened up a little bit. I'm getting calls from vendors and partners that might have some available equipment. Kind of the rule of thumb on any procurement that we do is we want to make sure that we can get our mitts, so to speak, on that equipment as quickly as humanly possible. Getting a MiFi or a hotspot in the middle of June isn't going to do our students a tremendous amount of good. So in going back to that time dimension that we talked about earlier, we very much, want to try to get our hands on any available equipment, in the next couple of weeks if we were to plan to extend that. Again, I know that, our city partners, the city leadership is looking at this very closely. I know that a fair number of folks in the philanthropic community are looking at potentially sponsoring schools or neighborhoods with these types of purchases. So, there's nothing I can speak to more definitively, but I hope this gives you just a little bit better idea as to what that landscape looks like. Again, there's a fair amount of my team's time that is basically spent on phone calls to providers, seeing what's available in stock. So if we can marry that, with a potential emerging need, we want to do it. Our STLS universe of students definitely had an acute need because they really don't have the advantage of leveraging some alternative channels. I think that we might identify other unique cadres of students, but at this point, I think reasonably you have to look at, well, if we're going to start hitting other cadres of students, how do we prioritize those groups? That gets a little bit tricky because we certainly don't want there to be haves and have-nots in that universe of students. So lots of different factors to consider, and I don't mean to confuse things by running you through the whole list, but those are kind of some of the factors that are the tapestry of context for us as we go about making these decisions.
Well, thank you, Phil, again for everything that you and your team are doing and for bringing some light to the nuances and the complexities of this situation. And I have another comment this time for Chief McDade, and it's sort of, I really appreciate you saying that you're going to be briefing us and updating us on how remote learning continues to go after the first 10 days. So I would love to, if possible, to hear more about what is happening with the youngest of our students in pre-K, because that has to the availability of internet access and devices. There's the issue of that parents need to facilitate the learning that is happening remotely. And that adds, of course, another layer of complexity to it already come. And also efforts, what's going on in terms of our students who are linguistically diverse and their families. How are students studying bilingual or dual language or programs, how are their needs being met, which are, again, very particular.
And that's some of the information that we'll be trying to capture, looking at across, but not just both our EL students, our DL students, primary students, not just pre-K, but really pre-K to second grade. How are they engaging, if engaging, and what some of the barriers are. So those are some of the things that we're looking to learn about what's happening, what's not happening, and how we can better support and resource our schools to be able to provide continuous learning to some of, not just our most vulnerable students, but our early learners who are dependent upon others to help them get through this.
We'll continue with questions from board members.
Phil, I want to echo the gratitude to you and Chief McDade that other board members expressed for the nuance, transparency, and just the really swift response to enacting the plan. And now that we're aware that it is going to be enacted for much longer than we originally hoped or anticipated, we can anticipate that circumstances for families might change, just given the economic impact on families in our city. What is the best way if families experience that change where they have a device or access now and it shifts? Is it to go through central office, or is it to reach out to their school or through their teacher who they're most regularly communicating with? Can you just share what the best way is if circumstances change for parents to seek support?
That's an excellent question. And I'll allow Chief McDade to amplify my answer. I think, first, let me thank you for the comments, but I will tell you that the largest part of this lift is chiefs, network chiefs, principals, assistant principals, teachers that come in to volunteer on distribution. This is the secret sauce. These are the folks that are doing a lion's share of the work. So while I appreciate the comments, I would be remiss in not saying that that's really where all the action is happening. We're just trying to facilitate and make sure that the runway is clear for them to succeed. I would say, if we're talking about general changes in status, I think it's always best to start with the local school, just to kind of apprise them as to what's happening. So for example, say someone who has a device now that maybe doesn't have a device later, or we give them a device and then that device falls off a kitchen table or something like that, which is going to happen. I think starting with the local school is always the best first stop. If it's something that the local school is not able to address, we've given principals some instruction as to how to maintain that connective fiber with my department relative to additional need. As well, we have a parent hotline that folks can call with more direct inquiry. Again, always start with the local school, because here's what we know. Principals, assistant principals, teachers have a much better command of what's going on in their local school communities than the central IT unit. But the central IT unit is here to kind of serve as a buttress or support to those principals when there's something that they are not able to handle directly. I also think it's important to go to the school level first. If for no other reason, then we always want to make sure that if there's any dialogue with a parent, that the principal, the teachers are in the loop as to exactly what's going on.
Thanks, Phil.
Questions?
President Avaya, this is Samuel Rivlary.
Yes, Vice President Rivera.
I wanted to echo everyone's thanks. Any part of this, whether the devices or the access or the shift to remote learning, would have been a huge lift by itself, especially in such a short time. And while everyone is individually transitioning to working remotely, coordinating the demands of work and their own families, and dealing with health and other concerns, it's really both impressive, and I feel a lot of gratitude that we have such a great team. We've talked through some great information here about each of those aspects. And Chief McDade, you mentioned that folks in networks and in the curricular departments are there to support individual teachers. I'm wondering if there is any plan, or if you think it's a good idea for teachers to be working together within schools and beyond, and how we are supporting or facilitating that, and whether it's happening so far.
So teachers are collaborating with their peers in their grade level teams across their schools. That's a part of some of the build out in terms of the time that teachers are committing to throughout the week, and the principals can still have their virtual team meetings with their teachers, which is the principal directed time. So those things are still happening across the district. We haven't established a structured way. There are, teacher PLCs that are continuing to happen through the Office of Teaching and Learning in terms of remote learning and what we can learn from each other and best practices. I think that there is more that we can do to try to bring teachers across the district together to share best practices and collaborate. And so that's something that we're working towards as we continue to build out some of the professional learning cycles that we have in place and some of the training opportunities that we have. But there are teacher PLCs that are cross-functional throughout the district that are continuing to happen, that have been established, that were already established through many of our academic offices, and those continue to happen are continuing to happen virtually, and they are sharing best practices that way. But as far as a concerted effort, specifically honing in on remote learning for the purposes of kind of pooling together best practices to share, that's something that we'll be working to put together so that we can not only learn more about what's happening in individual schools and places where this is being done well, but to make sure that across the district we are sharing those resources. So that's more to come on that.
President Del Valle, I got one more question.
Yes, please.
This is not related to the remote learning, but just going back to kind of the basics and the hierarchy of needs. Thank you for everything that the food distribution staff has done, right? So this has highlighted what an important role the school system and the teachers play in the lives of students, from social support, and emotional support, as well as a healthy outlet for all the students. So I know they miss their teachers. I know they miss their peers. On the food side, a very important need. Sounds like we've distributed over 6 million meals, which is a great touch point and a frequent touch point that we have. Just wondering, two questions, two-part question. One is how we're making sure that all of it gets distributed, that there is no spoilage. And thank you so much for putting on that dynamic tool to make sure that people can enter what the nearest address is so they can go pick up a meal. But one is, how do we make sure that all of it gets used and distributed to the most vulnerable students that need it, to make sure that they have it. And then secondly, as I'm connecting this frequent touch point, given that they go back for the meals, I wonder if there is anything we can do to use this engagement touch point to learn more about how are they doing with the learning. Do they have access to it? Do they have access to the device? Are they just coming in for the meal? And can we use that as a touch point to learn more about how is it going at home? How's it going with the schooling? How's it going with the device access, so that we can learn something, perhaps something that we're not learning through the electronic means, that we can learn through the physical means?
You're referring to when families come to pick up at the school?
Yes.
So that's a tough one, because with the pickup, we're really trying to maintain the physical health and safety, the social distancing. And so it's a real quick transaction of picking up their food and then leaving, and not having any period where families may be invited to kind of congregate, because that then defeats the purpose of some of the social practices. So that's hard to do, coupled with the fact that we have limited personnel in the schools during the food pickup. It's just the essential employees that are there to host the food distribution. Typically, an administrator is there for them to pick up the packets. But that one person, you could imagine several families coming, particularly maybe at the same time. We just wouldn't have enough personnel to have those kind of meaningful touch points. And considering the safety precautions that we have in place, it would be very difficult to do that in person, which is why we have more targeted time via phone for parents and students to talk with their teachers. And quite frankly, the teacher is the best person to do that, because teachers really know their families. And then there's a trust factor too, right? So when you have families that may be having some really challenging situations, sometimes they don't want to just talk to anyone that's available at the school. They want to talk to someone that they think that they can trust, that really understands them and understands their personal situation. So we think it's more personal to have the teacher. We have our counselors available too, as a part of the school office hours, so that families can talk to counselors or the social worker. And those are the people that are more equipped to talk to families and really get honest answers about what some of their challenges may be, where families may otherwise not be open to speaking to individuals that they're not familiar with.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? The outbound approach from teachers and counselors, some of their trust makes sense. What about the food distribution? How do we ensure there's no spoilage or minimal spoilage whatsoever to ensure that the food does get consumed by all those needed, especially these days as we keep seeing more and more people going to the unemployment lines and having more needs? We want to make sure that we optimize it.
I'll let Arnie respond to that, because I know he's working very closely with nutrition support.
Yep. So board member Sotelo, in the $6 million number that Dr. Jackson noted in her earlier remarks relative to food distribution since the pandemic started, that's inclusive of food being distributed at the sites, but also food being delivered. And as you could expect, given what you noted, the number of the delivery requests has continued to increase over time. So ultimately, our first line, aside from ensuring that we are packing food for food distribution, is making sure that any excess goes into those delivery routes. So to your point, we're working very diligently with our food staff as well as our increased pool of delivery drivers to ensure that we are taking advantage of available food to minimize that spoilage.
Thank you.
President Ovalle, can I
I
ask a
want to get
question?
back to Elizabeth. You
Yeah,
had
I was just going to
question?
ask, I have a couple other questions, but if it's okay with you, President Ovalle, can I wait till after public comment, just because I know folks are on hold right now on the phone, and so would it be okay if I hold my questions till after then?
Certainly, certainly. But I will ask a quick question, and if no other board member has questions for now and want to wait as board member Todd Breland is doing, let me know. But if not, I'll proceed and we'll make this the last question before we move on. The groups that we contract with to provide social and emotional learning services, are they connected? Are they being used by social workers to support families, to support students during this time, or are they on the sideline? What is the role of those groups, given that we have contracted with them for the rest of the year? Yes, Latanya?
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking to Arnie. Can you repeat that question?
The groups that we've contracted with, the community-based organizations that provide social and emotional learning services, are they connected either by way of social workers to provide support for families that are and students that are in need of support?
Yeah, so we do have some of our partners that are providing mental health support. I do have Michael Duzer here to joining us to talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships that we have through the Office of Social Emotional Learning. So Michael, if you can jump in and provide a little bit more detail around what's happening in OSCL and the supports that we have available.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Latanya. And thank you, President Ovalle. So several things are happening to support social emotional learning and supports for students as well as for families and teachers throughout the district right now. So I think for one, I would point to the remote learning plans that all schools were directed to create. And those include daily schedules, including virtual office hours, so that schools are reaching out to families and so that families can reach out to schools. And in those plans, schools are coordinating the schedules of their social workers, their school counselors, and their psychologists to be on call to consult with families, with students, and with teachers about student mental health concerns and to actually deliver virtual social emotional learning lessons. In addition, school counselors are being asked to be available for real-time interactions with students for at least 4 hours per day. And they are available for both group-based and one-on-one consultations with students, which is great and welcome and important news. Each network also has a social emotional learning specialist to assist with the implementation of the social emotional learning aspects of those remote learning plans. Beyond that, the Office of Social Emotional Learning has created a tool called SEL in a remote learning environment, which provides concrete resources to help schools build a sense of community in a virtual classroom, which is tough, how to teach SEL lessons in a virtual context, and also how to attend to their own well-being, as well as to respond to online challenging behaviors. This website has actually been made public, and it includes SEL resources for families as well. There's also another resource called Responding to Student Mental Health Concerns that OSCL had a hand in developing, which is designed to help teachers recognize and respond to concerns about student wellness and safety, particularly at this time. And it also contains guidance on how to respond to overall mental health concerns, as well as mandatory procedures for reporting DCFS calls and reporting bullying behaviors and things like that. The Office of Social and Emotional Learning also owns the Student Code of Conduct policy, and is already and is going to be actively monitoring reported incidents of online bullying, sexual harassment, and any other harmful activities that might emerge at this time, and will be working actively with schools to address any issues that should emerge in that respect. I think I would also add that beyond the efforts of school educators, which we're supporting, and the efforts of OSEL itself, we've also secured approval for select mental health and mentoring agencies to provide more intensive supports to students with the greatest needs. For instance, students receiving therapy prior to school closure, students in temporary living situations, and students involved in the justice system. So I think we've got a pretty robust framework for maintaining social emotional support, and it leverages both folks in schools as well as our central office folks, as well as our important partners. And we're looking to sort of refining and implementing this framework
Those partners
as time goes on.
Those partners include the CBOs that we've been contracting with.
A subset of them, yes. So not all of them right now are so approved, but we're pursuing a broader framework for partner engagement so that we can give really specific guidance to schools and partners, all of them, about how partners may engage with schools and students at this time to make sure that we're giving the best support that we can while also ensuring student safety.
So President Del Valle, some of the partners, we're right now working with both IT and our legal team to identify some of the things that we need to have in place to make sure that we're ensuring student safety. Now that we are virtual, we have to consider that, one-on-one virtual meetings, what does that mean by way of protecting Chicago's children? So there are some things that we have to make sure that we're putting in place to protect students when it comes to virtual engagement, particularly one-on-one, one-to-one virtual engagement. So while some partners are able to work with schools, we have we're looking at this as a tiered approach in terms of which partners are available to provide what types of supports and services, and what do we need to put in place for those partners who need to, quite frankly, work with students in a one-to-one fashion using the platforms that we approve of as a district. So that's more to come on that as we kind of work through some of the nuances around safety.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your responses. We're going to proceed with committee updates. There are no committee updates for this meeting. Announcements, please use our website, cpsboe.org. If you need to seek assistance or want to meet with a board member during office hours, we encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to meet with board members outside the board meeting. And then I want to announce that the application period for the 2021 Honorary Student Board Member will open on Monday, April 27th, 2020. We encourage rising juniors and seniors, current 10th and 11th graders, to apply. The deadline is May 29th, 2020. For more information, or I should say more information will be posted on our website, cpsboe.org. And do we have Joshua with us?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Joshua, yes, good.
Hello.
I'm glad you're here. I thought, given your experience as a student in a year unlike any other year, that's an understatement, of course. I'd like for you to say a little bit about your experience and also encourage students to participate, to apply.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you, President Del Valle. So let me just start off by saying that, serving on this board has been nothing but a completely positive experience. So us students are known to be passionate about, a wide array of issues, but often we don't know who to go to get these issues solved. And so serving on this board has allowed me to meet all the key people that I need in order to, advance on most issues concerning students. And so I've also had the opportunity to advocate on behalf of the entire student population during meetings. And so with all of those things considered, I strongly encourage any student who is passionate about advocating for students and taking that advocacy to a next level I encourage them to apply to be the next honorary student board member. So hopefully we get a lot of applications.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Josh. And you've done a fantastic job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting year.
Yes. Madam Secretary, please share the details of the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 27, 2020 at the CPS Loop office. Due to the Memorial Day holiday, advanced registration will open at 10:30 a.m. Friday, May 22nd, 2020, and will close on Tuesday, May 26th, 2020 at 5 p.m. or until all slots are filled, whichever is first. If anyone has any questions about this process, please contact the board office for our assistance. And Mr. President, I would like to note for the record that if the stay-at-home order is extended, the board will hold another virtual meeting on May 27th. Please monitor the cpsboe.org website for more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's now proceed with today's public participation session. As a reminder, union representatives will speak before public participation, and any elected officials will speak after the conclusion of public participation. Madam Secretary, please share the rules of public participation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we begin public participation, members of the public who registered to speak were given information to access this meeting by dialing a number and using their phone. We did this so that speakers with limited or no access to the internet, or who may have weak internet connection, or who don't have the necessary equipment to participate in the video call, could still participate using their phones. We want to make sure that even during these challenging times, our families and community members still will be heard. Speakers, please listen while I provide directions for public participation. In order to facilitate and expedite public participation, I will be calling speakers out of order and grouping them. I will call your name and number when it is your turn to speak. Once you hear your name, please state your name for the record. I will then start the 2-minute timer. When there are 30 seconds remaining, I will inform you so that you can proceed to conclude your remarks to allow for the next speaker to begin. Thank you. And Mr. President, we do have a few speakers before we start with the speakers list. Our first speaker will be Jesse Sharkey, the president of the CTU, followed by Chris Bayron, the CTU Acts Division Chair. And then we also have Troy LaRere, the president of the Chicago and Principals Administrators Association. Mr. Sharkey?
Thank you, Ms. Beltran, and thank you, members of President Zavai, CEO Jackson, members of the board. I just wanted to begin by acknowledging the continued hard work on the part of the CPS administration, school teachers, our paraprofessionals, clinicians who right now are designing our curriculum, planning lessons, teaching, conducting IEP meetings, distributing meals and devices, trying to look after students' well-being, all during this pandemic and dealing with their own households. I just, there's a lot of work going on. It might not be in the front of everyone's mind, but I just feel like it's important to acknowledge across the board. For the sake of brevity, I'll keep my remarks short. I want to begin by talking about grading policy. The Chicago Teachers Union was disappointed the board went ahead with issuing quarter three grades. We thought that should have been delayed in order to give teachers and school communities more chance to think through how to deal with grades at this kind of a time. But we do recognize there's a lot of pressure on this issue. So going forward, the CTU's advocated for two key components on grading. The first, we really feel like we need to be able to default to a pass, fail, or credit, no credit system in which we're giving credit or passing every student, perhaps with the exception of students who missed more days than were allowable under the attendance policy before school went remote. But the second element is that I think we should allow students or parents who want to have the ability to opt to receive a letter grade. And we just feel that giving students credit for semester 2 is the only fair way to account for the disruption that a global health pandemic has caused. We've, as the discussion before showed, we've got a significant number of families that lack high-speed internet connection devices or the home circumstances that make it possible for them to spend hours a day in front of a computer or a phone. Some students are going to want to opt for a grade. I think we should be able to do that. And then I just think we need to acknowledge that we're going to lose a certain amount of academic progress against a normal year, and that's unavoidable. It's happening all over the world, and that when school resumes, hopefully in the fall, teachers are going to have to adjust our curricula accordingly. And then, frankly, we do this on an individual basis anyway. That's grading. I would like to formally request that CPS disclose the number of students who we have not been able to contact, as well as information about the frequency of contacts. We mentioned to get earlier, but we've had that information for several weeks now about both New York and LA. And it will be useful to know, even though it's going to be a sobering number. Final thing I'll say is that while CPS and one of the city's largest charter operators, Acero, have been able to reach a number of agreements about how to conduct remote learning, we've got at least one operator, CICS, that's implemented new work rules and imposed conditions without so much as really consulting with us about what would be best for students and without bargaining for that. I want everyone here to know that the Chicago Teachers Union members are working hard to bring stability, safety, and continuing education to students during this time. But we're not going to go along with cynical attempts to use this crisis to weaken unions, save money, reduce employees or workers' rights, and cut student services. We think that people have a right to recovery. We've been advocating for a broad set of social policies, which we think will help improve the lives of working class people in the city. It would be the wrong time to resort to cuts. And so continue to hear for advocacy from the Chicago Teachers Union in this space. And with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharkey. Our next speaker, Mr. President, Chris Bayron, please.
Thank you, board members and CPS officials. I'll be very brief because Jesse hit on my most important concern is that members in the charter division, we need to be able to support students. So our working conditions, we have concerns about health and safety, and CICS has been a particularly bad actor in this sector. They implemented new work rules and conditions on our members without our consulting with us on what's best for students. In the schools, they refused to bargain with us, even though they refused to recognize that they're mandated to negotiate by the National Labor Relations Act, by the governor's order and our contract. And we have some members who've been, they've refused to negotiate at all on first contract language covering nurses, office staff, and deans. Obviously, those are some critical positions right now. I'll just finish by asking this board to please exert some oversight over this operator and generally in the charter sector, especially where people don't have a union to advocate for them. Our students need us now more than ever, and we know our students, so we need to be part of the conversation about how to support them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayron. And our next speaker, please, Charla Revere, please.
Morning, beautiful people. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Principals and assistant principals are on the front lines, as you know, risking their health and safety to get food and learning technology to students and families, but they're doing it without the material or policy protection they need. We ask principals if they receive guidance, which is clear written procedures, which is how we defined it, on technology distribution. 59% said yes. It is the only question that got a majority positive response. We asked if they received training, which we defined as instruction to help you learn, practice, and master the procedures. 92% said no. We asked if they received assistance, which we defined as training personnel to help them implement the procedures with fidelity. 87% said no. We asked if they received masks. 97% said no, and this was as of April 13th. We asked if they received gloves. 91% said no. We asked if they received hand sanitizer. 78% said no. Now, since getting these results, we've received some disturbing reports that although the district's privatized custodial and engineering management companies have been distributing what they call low-grade face coverings to maintenance personnel, some principals received one covering meant for one-time use, and some received no covering at all because they were not in the immediate vicinity of the person who was distributing them. Others indicated that they didn't receive one because Aramark told them they were not on the list, quote unquote list of specific principals who were designated to receive them. One assistant principal told me, and I quote, "The principal received one, and I, as the assistant principal, apparently am not important or respected enough to make that list." They also told us that they received no signage, 95%. Spacing markers, 98% said no. Barrier shield, 99% said no. These results, and again, this was 350 responses out of 1,050 principals, members and non-members, with a margin of error of 4%. So these responses are especially troubling, given the fact that this is all happening after this organization, CPAA, directly provided CPS with information showing that a quarter of principals have high-risk conditions, and 54% either have those conditions themselves or live with a high-risk family member. And still, this lack of protection is happening when you're asking people, in some cases, to come in face-to-face contact with thousands of people, with over 1,000 people in some cases, to distribute computers. We also found that 13% of principals said they had a staff member who was tested positive. 32% are aware of a student or a student household family member who has tested positive, 32%. We've also learned that some computer distribution sites are not getting security or paid staff support of any kind if they're not also a food distribution site. This has led to situations, for example, where a 60-year-old principal is distributing computers by herself in a school where over 360 crimes have been reported within a 2-block radius of her school with no security, not to mention no face masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. Principals at food distribution sites are getting hazardous duty compensation, while those who are distributing computers but are not food distribution sites are not getting hazardous duty compensation. I know that's not what you call it, but the 10% premium, I think, is what you all call it. That makes absolutely no sense given the fact that the people distributing the computers are even more at risk because they have to interact directly with the public. They feel insulted. And frankly, most of our members have said that they would reserve whether or not they got the compensation or not, but it feels incredibly, at the same time, 90% of them said it also feels incredibly insulting that the compensation is, one, not equitable, and two, not equitable between them and teachers, and two, not even equitable between some principals who are doing food distribution and others who are doing tech distribution only. It just makes no sense to them, and it's insulting. I'd like to end with some direct comments from principals on the survey and a direct statement of what we believe is needed. The comments are as follows, and there are 4 of them, and they're very short. 1, grocery stores are having their employees wear face masks, and they're putting up plastic dividers between customers and cashiers. But CPS is not doing that for food distribution workers or administrators. 2, I've never felt more dispensable in my entire professional life. I have underlying medical conditions. It feels like CPS truly doesn't care if I get sick, as long as they're able to say and have the talking point that they got technology out. 3, our zip code has already reported 370 cases of COVID-19. Did they even look at the data before selecting these sites? And last, CPS continuously repeats the CDC guidance, but provides nothing to help us comply with that guidance. In terms of what is needed, 1, equipment and supplies, personal protective equipment and safeguards for all school staff on site. That is not happening right now. 2, personnel, paid personnel, security and tech support to aid in food and computer distribution, particularly in computer distribution. It seems like CPS management is leaving the people who are only distributing computers to themselves, no paid staff support, no security if they're only distributing computers, and that is a heavy lift. Give them the support that they need in regard to personnel and in regard to supplies and equipment to keep themselves safe. And lastly, policy. Require that staff with high-risk health conditions must work from home. Don't even give them the option of coming in if they have high-risk health conditions. Make it a policy that they must work from home. Most of this data is on our site at chicagoschooleader.org. chicago.com, Chicago School Leader, .org, chicago.theschoolleader.org, chicago.theschoolleader.org. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'll now continue with the speakers on the speakers list. And our first speaker will be number 1, Jinan Chi, followed by the group from Lincoln Park High School. Number 2, Sarah Schachner. Mr. Chi?
Morning. My name is John Anchi, and I'm speaking on behalf of Raise Your Hand, Brighton Park Neighborhood Council, Chicago United for Equity, Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and other community-based organizations regarding public accountability for CARES Act funding. I wanted to start by thanking this board for building on its commitment to access by holding virtual meetings and broadcasting it live, allowing written submissions, and committing to COVID financial expenditure reports at each board meeting. I hope we can continue to expand public participation and transparency during this time. Good governance, transparency, and accountability were enshrined in our values for these times especially. We must continue to uphold them. This is also aligned with CPS's mission to build public trust with the community. Since the pandemic, Raise Your Hand has had dozens of productive communications with CPS, and we hope to see continued inclusive partnerships. We ask the district to carry these values and that trust forward by having families be a part of the decision-making for how COVID-related funding is spent, not just reporting after the fact. We're asking for the district to form a task force to help guide those decisions, one where parents and community organizations can bring their narratives to the table. Second, we believe that the district should initiate community input listening sessions where they can hear directly from parents and teachers. Lastly, we want the district to be transparent in their plan for using CARES Act dollars and receive public input before it is allocated. We are part of a school funding coalition that is asking ISB to reflect the same values of transparency and accountability to equity.
Mr. Chi, 30 seconds.
Let's work together to determine how funding can reach families most impacted and plan to address the waves of inequities that follow when we enter our new normal. No one has a playbook on how to navigate this. We don't expect the district to be perfect or present the solution. We expect the district to be in partnership with its families for the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chi. Mr. President, our next speaker is speaker number 2, Sarah Schachner. Ms. Schachner?
My name is Sarah Schachter. Within the week, Lincoln Park High School will be offering a principal contract to someone who is not John Thuet. Our community will work hard to move forward from the wrenching events of the past several months. But as you'll notice, our voice has not therefore been silenced. That is because our cause was never just about John or our school. We are simply a case study of the horrendous way in which valued members of CPS school communities can be treated. CPS often leads through fear, not collaboration, and that must stop. At Lincoln Park alone, according to a staff member wishing to remain anonymous, there are now 9 teachers under investigation. The staff member said, quote, "You can guess who they are, stricter teachers, tougher teachers." One staff member heard a student tell another teacher, "Be careful or I'll get you fired." That is the atmosphere that CPS creates when it marches accused staff out of buildings. It takes so long to complete investigations that teachers are kept out for weeks on end, sowing suspicion, and then reinstates them when accusations prove false by saying it's, quote, "safe for them to return," unquote, as if something lurid actually transpired. This is exactly what happened to one of our beloved teachers. I was a teacher in a suburban district. One of my colleagues was accused by a student of hitting her. A careful investigation followed, but both parties were treated with respect, student and teacher. The teacher was notified via a meaningful, thoughtful conversation with supervisors, not a cold accusation. The investigation did not result in the teacher being pulled for weeks and weeks.
30 seconds.
Yes, but when the accusations were proved false, it was made clear that no stain should remain on the teacher's reputation. There was a healthy balance, making sure students were safe, but also letting staff know that they would be treated humanely and with due process. The OSP, in the understandable quest to protect children, is trampling the rights and humanity of adults, obliterating lives and careers, and turning morals upside down. CPS will pay the price as administrators, teachers, and families flee the district. It's already begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schachner. Mr. President, we'll continue with the next speaker. Speaker number 9, please. John Moser.
Hi, thanks. My name is John Moser, a parent member of the Lincoln Park LSC. My daughter is a senior and my CPS journey will end soon. I want to focus on the story of Lincoln Park High School, the side of the story that you, the Board of Education, have probably heard. I know these are serious accusations and I support any actions backed by proven evidence. The general narrative of the story is that children were harmed and we had to protect them. These people did bad things, so bad that if you knew what we know, we assure you that you would feel comfortable with this decision. You need to trust us. The narrative and a series of accusations tied to 3 separate incidents is the foundation of the story that the Office of the CEO and the leadership team, CPS Legal, the OSP, and the IG have shared with you, the mayor, and local politicians and centers of influence in Chicago, that this decision had to be made. If this is the only story you have heard, my ask today is simple. Please think hard about the following questions. Do you agree that there are 2 sides to every story? Do you agree that the accused should have a voice? Have you seen any true input from or talked to any of the accused? Does it bother you that to this day, none of the accused know or were told what they did wrong? Do you know if the investigation is complete or still in progress? Does it concern you that developments since the end of January may offer some hope to some of the accused? Does it bother you there may be witnesses that could clarify some decisions or debunk some accusations? Have you seen true evidence supported by facts that proves that the accusations are worthy of a 1 strike and you are out termination? Reflecting on these questions, can you say with confidence that you are 100% secure in your fiduciary
Moser,
duty as it
30
pertains
seconds.
to oversight of CPS, particularly in this case? I don't ask this lightly. Oversight is hard. And if I were in your position, I know my moral conscience would compel me to seek both sides of the story. I believe you owe it to every student, parent, teacher, and administrator in CPS to demand more information, to dig deeper into this. And there is another side. Ultimately, we all know the truth will come out. And I have one last question. Is it unreasonable for us and for you to not just trust, but to verify the CPS version of this story? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. We'll continue, Mr. President, with speaker number 11, please, Julie Wall.
Hi, this is Judy Wall. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am here to continue to speak as a member of the Lincoln Park Parent Action Group and the Lincoln Park community as a whole. Janice Jackson says that she took the students' best interest and safety in mind when she swiftly removed our leaders, John Thuett and Michelle Brumfield. I call her bluff on that. I see this as a rash decision. You have not shown your work. You have not completed your investigation. If you took the best interest and safety of students to heart, then you would have listened to all sides of the story. You have failed to do this. You took one side and you didn't listen to or interview John Thuett or Michelle Brumfield. You have to provide evidence to them and to the Lincoln Park community. You have ruined their careers for what the community understands as procedural mistakes. We seek justice and answers, and we want them today. What evidence do you have to put students in harm's way? What evidence do you have to ruin these people's lives? During this time of the stay-at-home order, you have placed an extra burden on our teachers and vice principals that do not have a trusted leadership to help them through this difficult time. You thought that during this community time, our community would go away, and we have not. We continue to care about our principal and vice principal that you stole from us without explanation, and we're missing them more than ever. We're living in a time when we need trusted leaders at our school, but your shameful and cowardly acts to swiftly take away people that were making a difference in an incredibly short amount of time have left us out cold in this challenging time without our leaders. What evidence do you have to have done that? What is the investigation? Is it open or is it closed? Right now, when we are in such uncertain times, our assistant principals and our teachers don't have the leadership that they deserve. I'm confident that your actions have placed fear among our teachers and leaders that without just cause, their jobs are at stake now too. Janice Jackson has not protected our community by removing those incredible leaders. I demand that you show us your work. What were the actions of John Thuett and Michelle Brumfield, who never had a blemish on their record that caused an extreme decapitation of our community? Where have you shown your work? What is your evidence to have ruined their lives? What evidence is there that this was in the best interest for our students? Janice Jackson claims to have cared about our community. However, she did not once visit our school. She did not once visit with the students. She claims she cares about them, but she's not protecting them.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. And the last speaker, Mr. President, for the Lincoln Park High School is speaker number 13, Suzanne Wojciechowski, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you.
I'm here again speaking today to address the behavior of CPS, Dr. Jackson, and the CPS legal team. We do not think that you have the truth about what happened at Lincoln Park High School. Mr. Moriarty, Dr. Jackson, and others are giving you a one-sided story that includes misinformation. They seem to be masters of the technique of gaslighting. Gaslighting, a tactic in which a person or entity, in order to gain more power, makes a victim question their reality. CPS is exhibiting the classic signs of gaslighting. As Mr. Mosier stated earlier, the board, you too are victims here. Gaslighters tell falsehoods and are dismissive of your concerns. CPS says, we've got this. We know what's best for your students. You do not. Gaslighters try to align people against you. CPS has fed you, the board, and others like our aldermen and elected officials talking points that are clouded in generics and legalese. Gaslighters wear you down over time. CPS knows they can wear people down like they have done so many times with so many others in the past. Eventually, the victims will get tired of fighting and will forget about this. In the words of your LSC director, Willie, on February 3rd, 2020, you will have a chance to say your piece and we will all move on. Except we have not, Willie. We're still here. Gaslighters get you to question your reality. We keep asking ourselves, maybe they really do know things that we don't know. Except that would only be true if CPS had spoken to all of the people involved, which they have not. But yet they say that they have without proof. It's reminiscent of the Trump impeachment trials. The world knows the truth, but without allowing witnesses or evidence, they're saying, don't look, there's nothing to see here. Just please remember that in today's new reality in the digital information age, it's possible for people to get access to items that may not be made officially public. People like to share what they know. So imagine what some inside your organizations might be feeling and might be sharing. We believe the CPS community, as well as you, the board, is being gaslighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wojciechowski. Mr. President, we'll continue with the two speakers from Learn Charter School. Speaker number 3, please, Greg White, followed by speaker number 7, Saku Robertson. Mr. White?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Greg White, and I'm the CEO of Learn Charter School Network. I want to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to CPS's board and staff for standing strong with us during this incredibly challenging time. You have been a true partner in helping us feed our families and keeping us fully informed about the resources available to support them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm here to introduce you to our network of 7 elementary schools located in the south and west sides of Chicago. As you know, these are the communities hardest hit by COVID-19. At a future meeting, we will request the board to consider allowing Learn to reconfigure 2 of our west side campuses, Learn Campbell, a level 1+, and Learn Excel, a level 1 school. They currently serve students kindergarten through 6th grades. We will request to change the enrollment to K through 7th grade and reduce the total number of Learn seats on the west side. I want to clarify, our intent is to reconfigure and reduce the number of seats, not expand our enrollment. Our goal is to keep our Learn Excel and Learn Campbell 6th grade families at their school for 7th grade. Our families love their high-performing Learn schools, again, level 1 and 1+, and want to be able to stay during this time of stress and uncertainty. Our families want stability and continuity. They want to maintain their existing relationships, and they trust us. So again, at a future board meetings, you'll hear directly from Learn families about why adding 7th grade at Excel and Campbell campuses meets their needs for certainty, stability, and continuity. They will ask you to remove the anxiety and risk of switching schools and allow their children to stay at their current schools where they have thrived. In conclusions, know that we have received over 500 petitions from our families. They are the most important voice, and I hope you will listen to their wishes. In the meantime,
Thank you,
if you have
Mr.
any
White.
questions, please feel free to contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. President, the next speaker is speaker number 7, please, Saku Robertson.
Good morning. My name is Sekou Robertson. I'm the principal of the Learn Excel campus for the past 11 years. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm enormously proud of the hard work of our staff, Excel scholars, and the commitment of our families. We are a tight-knit school with close relationships with our staff and community. Excel has been rated a level 1 school or higher on CPS's SQRP scale for the past 4 consecutive years. And more importantly, our scholars are among the highest performing CPS elementary schools based on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness Test. Their proficiency levels demonstrate how strong the academic foundation is at Learn. We are doing an excellent job on behalf of our students and our families. 6th grade Excel parents are asking for the opportunity to continue their child's education at Excel. 44% of our 6th grade scholars have siblings already at the school, and they want to stay at the same school. Allowing these families to continue to attend Excel through 7th and 8th grade will benefit the academic readiness of the students for high school and will also minimize the disruption to the families, especially during this challenging time. I've shared a petition with over 550 families who are asking you to approve this change, which I understand may be on your May agenda. Hal Woods and his CPS team heard this direct plea during the AFA hearing earlier this month. Many of our community partners and the aldermen have also offered shared letters of support. As Mr. White pointed out, the CPS
Mr.
staff
Robertson,
have worked
30
closely.
seconds.
Yep, they have worked closely with Learn for over several months on its application and has recommended its approval. We all have a ton on our plates right now in this effort to provide effective remote learning and basic emergency support to our families. I'm sure that you have many challenges across the district that demand your attention. Please remove this anxiety from these families and allow our children to continue to attend at their school of choice, Learn, Excel, and Campbell campuses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Mr. President, we'll continue with 2 speakers regarding the AUSL Teacher Residency Program. That'll be speaker number 4, please, Jessica Kimbrough, followed by speaker number 5, Dre Patterson. Ms. Kimbrough?
Hello, my name is Jessica Kimbrough, and I am a diverse learner teacher and mentor at Dvorak School of Excellence. I have worked at Dvorak as a primary teacher for 6 years, or primary diverse learner teacher for 6 years, and Dvorak feels like home to me, like family. I am fully committed to providing students in North Lawndale with a valid and challenging educational experience. I began teaching through the AUSL Chicago Teaching Residency Program, and it was there I was given the foundational tools to be a successful teacher and impact student learning. In the CTI, I had the opportunity to work alongside and learn from an experienced mentor teacher in the safety net of a mentor-resident relationship. I was able to learn from challenges and grow in every new experience. And as a first-year teacher, I was able to apply my knowledge of teaching strategies, data-driven instruction, and more in my own classroom. But it didn't stop there. And since I've begun teaching, AUSL has continuously provided me with the ongoing supports I need in order to develop me as an educator. The mentoring torch was passed to me 2 years ago. And though I learned so much as a resident, nothing challenges you more than the charge of developing high-quality educators. I've enjoyed mentoring residents through a cycle of modeling, coaching, and feedback. I've also enjoyed watching the growth of my students with additional supports in the room. Being a part of the AUSL teaching community has been the single most valuable component of my teaching career. Thank you, CPS, for your partnership in this program.
Thank you, Ms. Kimbrough. And our next speaker, Mr. President, speaker number 5, please, Dre Patterson.
Hi, yes, good afternoon. My name is Dre Patterson, and I'm currently a math instructional coach at Marquette School of Excellence, an AUSL school on Chicago's South Side. I've worked at Marquette for 8 years, 5 of those years as an intermediate classroom teacher, and 3 as a math instructional coach. Being at Marquette the past 8 years has been quite a positive journey in my teaching career. From the students, families, faculty, and staff, the school has been my second home. I built so many positive personal and professional relationships that have impacted me, and it all began 9 years ago when I began training to be a teacher through the AUSL Chicago Teacher Residency Program. Being an African-American male whose family is from the South Side, I knew when I decided to switch careers to be a teacher that I wanted to do so in an area where I could really support Black and Brown students similar to myself. I was fortunate enough to begin my teaching path by training under a well-qualified and amazing mentor teacher, Tanika Brooks, at the National Teachers Academy and AUSL Training Academy. It was there I learned the importance of classroom management, content pedagogy, and how to support students' socio-emotional needs as well, which for our students can be extremely important to their success. It was also in the residency that I learned some of the most important words that I would hear. It's all about the kids. That mindset of doing everything in the best interest of kids has driven my practice. It helped me stay resilient during my first year of teaching when times could be a bit challenging, and led me to become a mentor teacher where I trained new teachers for 3 years, allowing them the same enriching experience I had. And they have also gone on to continually impact the students of Chicago. Without AUSL's vision and continued coaching and support, I would not be where I am today. So I thank them for everything they've invested within the residency program and for instilling in me from early on that the important work we do is all about the students of Chicago. Thank you so much for your time this morning and allowing me to address the board. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. And our next speaker, Mr. President, speaker number 6, Ling Young, please.
Hello, my name is Ling Young. I'm a senior from Highland Park Academy. I've noticed this year coming up, I've noticed that I've worked hard for nothing. And now that we are in this crisis and working hard isn't enough at this moment. I'm asking the board to reissue, put the money back. Use the money that we are using for police in schools, because we do not have any at this time because we are not in schools, to reallocate the money to the communities, to put it back into the communities that are in need. I heard that you guys are talking about that you guys are making efforts to get devices and things for families in need, but it's more than just having that for families in need. People aren't eating. People aren't, living. School is where we have our safe haven, and safe haven is, our school isn't our safe haven anymore. So home has to be. So I feel having to reallocate the $33 million that you have inside of the police schools budget will be more than enough to help the families that we have, the undocumented families, the teens that are in need, the teens that are homeless, the families that are in need. It's not more than just the families that are in need, it's the communities that are in need that our schools are in. I'm a senior in high school at Hyde Park Academy, and what I've noticed being there, that once you're in school, you're okay, but once you leave, it's nothing.
Ms. Young,
And I feel,
you have 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds, okay. And noticing that being home is harder than going to school. So I've just asked the board to reallocate the $33 million that you have in this police schools budget, to reallocate it into our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Our next speaker, Mr. President, is speaker number 8, please, Betty Green.
Thank you. I am Betty Green, and I chair the North Lawndale Community Action Council with Dr. Leonard Moore. In Chicago, we have 8 community action councils. All of those councils are continuing to work to serve the families and youth during the pandemic. One thing we have done is working to ensure that there are COVID testing sites within our community. North Lawndale now has one at the Lawndale Christian Health Center. We've been holding virtual meetings with the principals to ensure that all youth are able to access remote learning. Many of our parents and temporary learning sites have expressed a great appreciation to Chicago Public Schools for the hot spots. We've met with Chief Higginbottom to determine the additional needs of the youth and families within our communities. One is a physical need. All CACs have provided food, toilet tissue, sanitizer, paper towels for the needed families within our communities. These resources have been provided by the Salvation Army, the Chicago Food Depository, the Midwest Food Bank, and Costco's and North Riverside provides the care packs for North Lawndale. In addition, one of our CACs have been providing $250
Ms. Green, you have 30 seconds.
certificates. Okay, finally, we've distributed masks throughout the city of Chicago that were donated by Dr. Wilson. I'd like to thank Dr. Chip Johnson, Carl, and Adrian for providing guidance to us through biweekly meetings and daily phone calls. I'd also like to thank Pam Price of the Parent University for the many resources that she has provided to us. Finally, tomorrow, we're going to meet with the city in terms of a webinar to try and determine how can we still hire our students for the One Summer Chicago program, because they need it more now than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. President, the next speaker is speaker number 10, Jeannie Liu, and I will read her statement. Hello, I am not able to stay on the call much longer. I had not planned on being on the call longer than 1 hour. I am sorry. I do have questions as to how the board plans on addressing the needs of our special needs learner. I have heard many comments about they are trying to address the needs of our vulnerable population, and a large amount of time today was used to talk about the internet, Chromebooks, and accessibility. My concern as a parent with a son in a cluster program at Amundsen High School that not only has mental delays, but he has the added vision impairment, is that digital lessons are not meeting his needs. The teachers and school have been slow to adapt and make accommodations. His lessons are not individualized, and it is a huge challenge. Parents like us need help the most. We feel the board has forgotten that. This population needs the most support because learning is not one facet. I would like to know what is being done, not just kind words and words of self-praise. Parents who work full-time with special needs children not only need another model of instruction, but we also need help learning how to teach our kids now that we are the teachers. What is the board's specific plan to help the cluster teachers at Amundsen School? I did not want to say I do not appreciate the teachers at Amundsen, but we need more supports. Jeannie Liu, mother of Benjamin Liu and a sophomore at Amundsen. That is her statement, Mr. President. I'll continue with the next speaker. Speaker number 12, please, Natasha Erskine.
Good afternoon to the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak virtually. My name is Natasha Erskine. I'm a CPS alum. My child attends Lindblom. Let me tell you, the principal, administrators, and educators should be a part of your benchmark sharing and best practices amid COVID-19. It matters when families receive clear, consistent, consumable info with palpable compassion and school spirit felt through their emails and then the Remind app. Given these times, it's great to see an administration who are putting people first. If you don't have an open process to share best practices, this is the time to create it. And speaking to other CPS parents and local school councils, they do not have the same comforts for their children and learning amid a global health crisis that's devastating our zip codes, neighbors, and our families. In real time, there are absolute process gaps and blind spots in the areas briefed by the leadership today. There are long poles in the tent, and quite honestly, I think we're seeing the chickens come home to roost because inequity and biases have persisted for far too long. The notion that when America catches the flu, Black and poor folks get pneumonia is real. Many of our families are not on Twitter, Facebook, and have access to email. On technology, to put a pin on the equity gap, it is as wide as the city. There are far too many families who have still not been contacted by schools to cure the tech divide, understanding technology, remote learning supports, and parent expectations. If we're being honest, there are devices available in some schools. I would like to have a lot more time because the parent at Lincoln Park was given it. I'm talking about the deep inequities. Please add 45 seconds. Thank you. But the perception and biases in those schools are that families may lose or damage devices. There again is potential bias. Some of the governing bodies say that they're waiting on the district to advise if they can backfill or replenish potential losses post-COVID-19 and when they can expect them so that they can release the devices that are available in schools today. For families with six children who cannot safely get on a CTA to go to the school to pick up a laptop, how can you link the district to the community aids and other city resources that is being used to help our communities during the health pandemic? On the far south side, you all know that the internet connectivity is scant. There's a growing need for the district to partner with the business and philanthropic sectors to prioritize the gaps as seen in other cities across the map. The lack of this causes real-time confusion and discourse at all levels, particularly among local school councils who are willing and waiting to be called to your decision-making tables. From my military experience, agility and communication beyond line of sight is how we remain mission-focused. And finally, I'd like to invite the board and as many CPS leaders who can join us next Thursday for a meeting where local school councils and communities have built synergy across our schools and communities, where we're talking about the issues and really trying to organize to help ourselves because we're just seeing far too many gaps. So I'll send that and follow up in an email with an invite if you all can join us next week. Thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Erskine. Our next speaker, Mr. President, 14, Christine Palmieri, could not join us at this time, but I will read her statement into the record. Board of Education members, while we will all be understanding and forgiving during this unprecedented time, I must express deep concern with unnecessary barriers and delays in access to remote learning for tens of thousands of special education students in CPS. These delays are caused by insufficient and inefficient communication to staff and families from CPS and ODLSS. The move to remote learning has highlighted known weaknesses in communication and transparency from the department, which continues to lead to misinformation and misinterpretation of both existing special education laws and understanding of changing policies throughout our neighborhood schools. CPAs delayed providing written guidance to staff and families. Information regarding IEP meetings was produced by a FAQ sheet on March 22nd. A follow-up FAQs 2.0 sheet was produced on April 20th, and we are told a FAQ 3.0 will be forthcoming. The districts has had since March 30th to organize remote learning plans, and formal remote learning began on April 13th. Federal and ISB guidance on special education has been released for weeks and is regularly updated. ODLSS has been canceling meetings with the advocates and ISB. Many special education families have not heard from their schools. Many special ed teachers do not know if they can conduct small group virtual meets. RSPs are not providing direct services, or in most cases, any services at all. While schools follow FERPA, HIPAA, guidance has allowed for flexibility and families can sign waivers if there is a liability concern. We need to move forward and end all delays in providing related services. SECAs have been given guidance of support only, guidance support to staff only, and not the students on their caseload. Dr. Jones discussed a new co-teaching model for remote learning, which is effectively leaving out many students. Many families have given up, and undoing this damage will take significant time to lead to more delays. In short, continued communication and transparency inefficiencies within CPS and ODSS have caused significant delays in provision of special education remote learning supports and services. Purposeful withholding of and delay in providing guidance to staff and families is not an acceptable excuse for refusal to provide special education supports and services to the greatest extent possible. Please take all steps possible to engage with and repair this unnecessary damage, including district-wide surveys, additional ODSS communication platforms, and increased opportunities for stakeholder involvement and feedback. Signed for Christine Palmieri, Chicago SPED PAC. Thank you, Mr. President. And then the last speaker on the speakers list, Mr. President, will be speaker number 15, Elena Rogers, please.
Yes, this is me. Hello, my name is Alina Rogers. I'm calling about the children on the south side, the southwest side, the southeast side. I'm calling because our children get the worst of everything. I heard there was Chromebooks sent out, and the children of Chicago did not get the Chromebook. It's like they gave us the used Chromebook, the beat up Chromebook. I have 2 children that have medical, they sick children. They have medical, disease. They have like sickle cell disease, my daughter, and my daughter, she had a G2. I cannot afford to get a used Chromebook that's been at the school, that's been nasty, that's been in poor condition, and for one of my children to get sick from. I'm just calling in to let them know that we are parents and we are with the community, and we want better Chromebooks for our children. The suburb children, the north side children, they all got better Chromebooks than our children. Our children are always getting to refurnish, reuse, everything. Books, you name it, they get to use everything. And I feel it's wrong. they should do something about this. It's not, our children, we are the inner center children that's in Chicago, they the inner, center, we the main part of Chicago, and CPS get money for things and our children never gets them. That's all I'm calling about. And I'm just a little upset about this because I feel we always get the end of everything. Our children don't get anything. We get the end of everything. Books, Chromebooks, iPads, anything. Is we get refurnished and used things. That's all I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
And all right, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, this concludes the speaker's participation.
Thank you. Chief McDade, could you speak a little bit about where we're at with diverse learners in terms of remote learning?
I actually have invited our Chief Officer of ODLSS, Stephanie Jones, to share an update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief McDade. Thank you, President DeValle. We have, as stated, we have added into our initial remote learning packet in regards to guidance and supplemental materials to support our diverse learners. We have, based on the questions and feedback from our teachers, our principals, the parents, we have added those questions into a FAQ to be able to answer everyone's questions at once. We have that loaded, available on our website. It's also, I've put robocalls out. As the ISBE's guidance changes or has the updates that come from ISBE, we are updating our information to ensure that parents and teams are aware of the changes and how we move forward. So we have included supplementary material to ensure that we are providing academic digital and non-digital work, support for our cluster classrooms and teachers, social emotional, occupational therapy, physical therapy, social work, speech and language. Our teams have provided professional developments for our teachers that have virtual hours available, as well as have been attending weekly virtual meetings with Raise Your Hand just to answer questions with parents. We haven't canceled or delayed any meetings. We actually have advocate meetings scheduled tomorrow and our parent advisory council meeting scheduled tomorrow. So we continue to send updates. And so when the FAQs go out, we actually directly send them to our parent advisory council team so that they are aware and able to distribute to additional parents.
Okay, and I'm sure you made note of all the comments that were made today and you'll be following up on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if Phil is still on the line or maybe Chief McDade can answer this. For parents that have problems with the devices or they're not working or dissatisfied with the device, what's the step that they take to address that problem?
The first step is to contact their school that distributed the device, which we've had some situations where devices have gone out and a family member recognized that it was something wrong with the device and got a replacement. So the first step is to go to the school because of just tracking. So when those devices go out, they are tracked to the family where the serial number and information is recorded. So if a device is something wrong with the device, we want to replace it, but we also want to make sure that the replacement, we have it tracked to the family that it has gone to. So the first line is to go to the school. And then we also have our 553 kids number where families can get support from ITS if they are having some problems with the device, not been able to reach the school.
But the devices that were distributed, that were in the schools, those were inspected prior to distribution.
So the schools go through the inspection process in terms of powering up, checking to make sure that they're working. It is a large device distribution, and for some schools more than others because they have more students enrolled that may need the devices. And so there may be occasions where there's a miss in a device that was given out, but once the family contacts the school, if in fact there's a device that has been distributed that may not be functioning or it was missed that there's some damage to the device, they can reach back out for a replacement. I mean, I can't guarantee that every device with the amount of the short order turnaround on distribution and the quantity. I would imagine that there were some situations where a device may have gone out that may need to be replaced. And in that case, it's just contacting the school to get that device replaced.
But that can be addressed immediately.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, I want to make sure that questions or comments from other board members, that you have an opportunity to do that, or comments and questions regarding items on the public agenda that moving to. Are there any other questions?
I have some questions. The first is, and sort of beyond what was discussed earlier in terms of social emotional learning that's happening in the remote learning plans. Can we hear a little bit more about specifically mental health services that are available? As was mentioned clearly, in a normal circumstance, we know that students and families have mental health concerns, and in this current situation, those have been exacerbated. So what's available there via or through CPS, or that CPS can connect families and students with? And maybe related to that, I think it was in Dr. Jackson's comments, you mentioned the Office of Student Health and Wellness Resource Guide. Can you say again where to find that as well? Thank you.
I think Dr. Fox is on to provide probably more detail than I'll be able to provide in terms of the Office of Student Health and Wellness. But a couple of things. One, even beyond what CPS is able to offer, the state did announce Call for Calm, which is a support line for mental health and COVID-19. And so families can text the word TALK, T-A-L-K, and a licensed mental health counselor will contact them in 24 hours. And we've shared this information on our 553 kids line so that families have access to that information. So that's one thing. We also have, we are working with partners, and so we have a wealth of resources that are available and posted on our site as well for basically all Chicago residents and not just for the students in CPS. Some of which are connections to Bright Star Community Outreach Trauma Counseling Helpline. So there's a helpline there. Connections to free teletherapy services at Chicago Department of Public Mental Health Centers, and they can families can call 312-747-1020 to get those kinds of services. There's after hours support and a contact crisis line that serves anyone in any type of crisis 24 hours a day. And that for that one, texting the word HOME, H-O-M-E, to 741-741 to access a trained crisis counselors, another support that we have. Tips on managing anxiety and COVID-19 is available in English, Spanish, Polish, simplified Chinese, Arabic. So that's also available. And then we also have some resources around coping during COVID-19. We did provide guidance for parents in talking to children about COVID-19 in various languages as well. And then we have a contact to NAMI Chicago helpline for mental health counselors, and families can call 311 or directly they can call 833-626-4244. So those are some of the direct resources that we have available, which are not all provided by the district, but we're connecting families to city agencies and resources that we have because the need is so much greater than what we are able to provide solely as a district.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the resources that I was mentioning earlier can be found on CPS's coronavirus response page. So that's cps.edu/coronavirus. And there are a menu of options. If you go to health and wellness, the materials that I was speaking about are there. There are notes in multiple languages on how to talk to children about coronavirus. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there are direct links to some of the resources that Chief McDade just mentioned, as well as others.
Thank you. Another question I had, and this came up in comments too, but was about grading. And I know lots of people have concerns about grading. Clearly third quarter is done. I had my parent teacher conference this morning before I got on this call. But for fourth quarter, can you, I know it's still evolving, but can you say something about your general approach to the ISB guidance, particularly the ISB guidance around no educational harm? Because again, students are not in person here, as was mentioned, and I know Dr. Jackson has mentioned this as well. You know, our families are going through lots of different things right now. Our young people are going through lots of different things, financial burdens, mental health concerns. And so making sure that whatever type of assessment is done is not ultimately an assessment of physical, mental health, or, you know, access to devices in this context. But again, of course, learning continues. I get that message loud and clear, but I think just thinking about the ISB guidance around past incomplete and your thoughts on that at this point. And I say this as someone who's doing remote learning right now at the college level, and many of my students are facing some of these similar concerns. And we have moved to a credit, no credit option, or, you know, that you can opt whether you want to go credit, no credit, or whether you want to go, you know, ABC letter grade, but there are no D's and no F's. You just get no credit in this semester. So curious about your thoughts and processes for thinking about the fourth quarter.
So we're in the process of trying to build out what that guidance for fourth quarter could look like, valuing the hard work that teachers and students are doing in this time, and grades that they are earning, while also ensuring their safety nets to make sure that we're protecting students who have some of the challenging situations that you just described. I don't have a lot of details to share now because I want to respect the fact that we are trying to collaborate in good faith with CTU. We have been researching what districts across the country have been doing around grading so that this is a thoughtful and meaningful process, as well as talking to principals in the district and teachers in the district, as well as parents and students, and understanding how they are approaching this. A lot of things have to be considered in the fact that we do know that students do need grades on their transcript. We know what some of the universities are messaging to students, where even students that have just recently been accepted to universities where I personally know have gotten letters telling them that they need to maintain a certain GPA. And so you have, you know, both sides of the coin. You want to make sure that we are respecting and honoring the hard work that students are putting in during this remote time, but also showing the sensitivities and protecting those students that may not be able to engage, but making sure that we are still staying motivated around academic engagement while prioritizing social and emotional learning. So we do value the work that our students are showing, the resiliency that they're showing in making good on being engaged and doing the work that the teachers are spending so much time putting together and assigning. But also we know that we've got to find some middle ground where students are able to, who are able to engage and do work, do really great work and have grades on their transcript, while also looking at our options for putting some stopgaps in place so that there's no harm being done to students who may not be able to engage in the same way. So that's how we're overall approaching it, looking at both sides of that. How do we protect the learning and ensure that students are earning grades that may need to be on transcripts for a variety of reasons, whether they've been working hard to improve their GPAs or it's going to impact their ability to pursue their post-secondary interests, as well as looking at what our earliest learners are doing and the need that the dependency that they have on someone helping them be able to access the learning and the challenges that are happening in the homes. So I think we're taking a well-rounded approach and listening to the voices of the people that are being impacted by this, so that we can come to a middle ground that honors, to the best of our ability, the competing priorities around grading. That's I think the best that I can give now without compromising the collaboration that needs to take place with our partners in CTU as we build out some grading guidance to move forward. But we are going to come forward with specific guidance around grading that will capture both grading student assignments and what goes on in the grade book and on the transcript, as well as what we're doing to protect those students who may not be able to engage.
Thank you. I have one more sort of group of questions and then I'll be done. So my question is about, and maybe might be helpful for the CFO. The first part of the question is about last month's delegated authority, the $75 million, and any updates that, or when whether there'll be a report or something put out or some updates about how those funds are being spent periodically and where folks can go to look for that. And then the second part was about the CARES money. And so I know the CARES money is being distributed based on Title I eligibility, but it's not Title I money. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to the same things that Title I money goes to. But could you talk a little bit about your approach to that CARES money and thinking about issues around equity? I really appreciated the giving of the MiFi hotspots to our STLS students and families first. That makes a lot of sense, right? And thinking of those who are in greatest need. But if you could speak more about your thoughts about thinking about those CARES funding with an equity lens and what that looks like.
Good afternoon. This is Miroslava. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, you have received, I think this week, a report of all the COVID expenses, all the way to April 10th of all the sources, authorities that the board have given us for and then you also receive a report related to the commitments that are under the $75 million authority from the board. Also, in the future, we're working right now in a budget for the CARES Act, funding the $205 million that has been allocated to CPS. So we're working right now as we speak in a budget that it will be presented to the board in the near future.
And can we share or is there a public forum or way to share that information, particularly about the $75 million as we discussed last month?
Yes, you should have received it and it should be in your board material. That's my understanding.
No, it's in my board materials. I'm asking for the public to have some accounting of this as well.
Yes, so the reports are going to be placed in, I think it's going to start with the $5 million from the 75 million resolution. Is going to be public posted in the public face, and also monthly the report of all the authorities are going to be posted in the public face too.
Other questions? Member Todd Breland?
No, I'm a stop.
Oh, okay. But when will that be posted?
President Del Valle, I will find that out for you. I know it's going to be posted, but I don't exactly have the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will follow up on that one point. So related to that, on the CARES side, will that budgeting also, will that part of that be made public as well, in addition to how the 75 million is being spent?
I don't know at this point, but we're working on the budget to present it to the board first.
Okay, thank you.
Let me, just to clarify, because there are a lot of numbers being thrown around, the $75 million is related to the authority that we've asked the board to spend outside of contracts and the budget for this year. I want to be clear that we don't have a total of $280 million that we're trying to spend, and that 280 is the anticipated 205 that we have not yet received. This is all us looking at what has been authorized and looking at current formulas to see what CPS would be due. It's important to note that I don't believe that the state, and if they have, they just recently submitted their application to receive those funds. So districts have not yet received any information officially about what they will receive. However, to your point, we have started a process to create a budget so that we are not just spending against COVID, which we had to do immediately because of the circumstances, but to put out a comprehensive budget that we would then bring to the board for feedback, socialization, and obviously approval. And of course, we would make that public prior to any kind of board meeting so that the public is made aware of that as well. I think what Miroslava was also referring to earlier is that we will make public the money that we have spent above and beyond our authorization. So the $5 million that was in your board materials. We're going to post that online. And of course, when the funding for how we will spend the CARES money is determined, we will post that online. I think what's also important to note along these questions of budget, especially with our school budgets coming out, there are a lot of unknowns. And $200 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually not a lot if we don't receive the same funding for property taxes. If the state for some reason cuts budgets and uses this to supplement that, there are just a lot of things we don't know. But in preparation, we are putting together a budget that if things remain the same, if funding levels and revenue streams remain the same, and we have an additional $200 million, this is how we propose to spend it. And some of that has already been spent out of sheer necessity, but there will be additional dollars that we will be coming to the board to socialize. We did not want to conflate all of these numbers. Right now, the board has been getting briefed on the school budgets, which are set to be released by the end of this month. And so there's just a lot of numbers swirling around, and we wanted to make clear how we're chunking this. But any funds that we are spending in response to to COVID, the board has been made aware of those up through April 10th, and we will continue to keep you guys updated, and we will post those on our website so that they're available for the public domain, and we will continue to respond to any media requests that we get for that information.
Just for the sake of transparency here, the report that was given to the board on COVID-19 expenses as of April 10th, 2020 is a total of $32 million. And we anticipate that when we do get the federal dollars, that those costs will be covered. Most of those costs will be covered by the federal dollars that we'll be receiving. But then there will be expenditures when we start to plan out what we're going to do during the summer, for example. And that's what you're working on.
Yes.
Coming to the board.
Yes, thank you for that, President Del Valle.
Okay.
Mr. President, if I may, just for clarification, the public agenda has the CFO report as Board Report 200422 FN1, identifying the total amount as $5,048,017.
Okay, Janice, explain the difference between these two figures, the figure I gave.
The difference, there are two figures that we're talking about. The first, if we go back to the resolution from March, we asked the board for authority to spend outside of contracts that we have and outside of the budget that the board approved last spring or summer. The $5 million is specifically funds that go above and beyond money we had anticipated spending and would not have ordinarily spent if we were not faced with COVID. The additional money that is listed, we were able to spend on contracts that we currently have. And so that's why we're making that distinction. So for example, paying principals a premium pay was something that we would not have incurred if it weren't for COVID. That falls under the $5 million. But paying Safe Passage, I'm just making up an example, during this time to keep people employed is money we would have spent anyway, but we are still identifying that, pulling it out in that $32 million so that you can see, although this is a contract we had in place and money we would have spent potentially on their regular service, these are funds that were expended because of COVID, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So
yes.
we just want to be clear about additional funds over and above what we had budgeted, because that's the real threat to our fiscal position. Any spending we do above and beyond that, we need to be able to account for that. And much of that is going to come from CARES if CARES rolls out the way that we think. But we just want to make sure we're keeping track of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members?
Yes, President Valle, I have a question, and one is probably more of a statement, and then I have a follow-up question. Let me start kind of with the statement on the public comments. First of all, thank you for your feedback, for your input. Just know that we always follow up with this. We follow up with the leadership team. We follow up with our chief of staff, and then we have a follow-up process. What I like about the feedback process and some of the information that I heard, and I appreciate Chief McDade's response to the grading question, is it's a collaborative process that we need to take into account, and we certainly need to work with all the teachers that we possibly can through the CTU representation to understand what's going to be the best way to determine the grading that takes all of it into account, as well as how does it take into account true engagement, true learning, right? How do we motivate the students to want to learn, especially when we're having public discussions about a grade, no grade? Want to make sure that we don't inadvertently discourage and not inspire students to want to learn, especially the most vulnerable students. We need to make sure they continue to learn and not let this opportunity, and it will, listen, there will be some students that fall back, and we're going to have to account for it in the remediation work that we do either during the summer or when we start again in the fall. We're going to have to plan for that. We're going to have to budget for that. As it relates to these budgets, I just want to make a point here. And I think we all know it intuitively, but let's just sort of put it at the table. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't know the ramifications of this crisis to the total economy. We don't know the ramifications to the city. We don't know what it's going to do to the operational safety of both us as a network and us as a city. And there's a lot of revenues that depend on a lot of services that are not being provided today. And it's beyond just the residential, it's the businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the revenues that come in to help fund the funds that we have to operate, right?
Yeah.
So as we get those unknowns figured out, it's going to impact our budgets.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to make sure that we're responsible stewards of all of that and take that into account. So we shouldn't assume that the 205 CARES Act is already given. We're probably behind already,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest.
Mhm.
So let's make sure that we don't start going spending something until we figure out and let the operational and the financial leaders make sure they put all of those scenarios in front of us so that we can make informed decisions as we fund this year's budget and we look forward to next year's budget, right? So there's one thing to allocate budget, it's another thing to fund it. They're two different streams, right?
Yeah.
The allocation is the easy process. The funding part is the hard part,
Mhm.
right? And the funding part is the stuff that we're still trying to figure out.
Mhm.
And let's make sure that we don't go and make assumptions that things are going to be business as usual, because what happened over the last 20 years, you can't model that. You can't model what just happened based on the past 20-year history on what's transpiring now and how the business are going to recover. That impacts the revenue stream that funds the funds that we use to provide the education that we need for all our students and certainly our most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Board Member Truss.
Member Truss, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say to CPS leadership and staff, and all of our colleagues, thank you very much for everything everyone's doing in these extraordinary times. I do want to say that having discussion with senior staff during the briefings, a lot of questions I may have had were pretty much answered, and those concerns were shared, because the big sentiment for community stakeholders was making sure we're keeping the most vulnerable students engaged. And I do believe, and I'm confident that between the principals and the district and working with the teachers that those mechanisms are in place. Because there's the unfortunate reality that we can only push people so far, and there's those extraordinary challenges out there.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, just discussing with Chief McDade's staff about those contingencies, about utilizing the summer months, or once we, with the system of tracking that's who are engaged, who's not, to be able to specifically narrow in on those students who may need that little extra TLC. So I just want to just commend staff for listening and
We're having some connection difficulties.
You know, because I
You're back.
Pardon me?
We're having some connection.
Oh, with me? Oh, that's probably because my mic fell off.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, microphone problems, my fault. But no, I just wanted to say that, you know, pretty much that the staff has really listened to, you know, just talking with staff, listening to some of the concerns I've had about, you know, the most vulnerable students, keeping them engaged and encouraging them, and also planning to make sure that there's that, you know, those students who probably didn't engage like we want them to, that there's that contingency planning for additional enrichment.
President Del Valle, I just want to make a comment regarding the grades. And I think I'm preaching to the converted, but I just want to encourage that each and every one of us and the CPS administration consider you know, equity issues in terms of grading, because the grades during this very, very unusual times, it's going to reflect a lot more than student effort and engagement. And how we account for that is a huge challenge, but I think we have to keep our eye on that particular potential, you know, negative impact of grades. And I am not a, you know, an expert on grades and on how and alternative ways of evaluate engagement and student learning. But I think that bringing all constituencies, CTUs, families, if possible, maybe through the community action committees and principals to consider this this issue, it's going to be very important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, and related to that, and I think LaTanya did a really good job explaining, you know, the path forward and how we're thinking about it. But a few things that I do want to lift up, because I mean, that's part of the reason why we're not able to put out our grading guidance just yet. We're close. And, you know, as LaTanya alluded to, we have to work with CTU and others to look at what we're proposing and make sure we're striking that right balance. The one point I do want to highlight around equity, because it's a term that gets used a lot, and I just want to make sure people understand how we're thinking about it. And I don't want to narrow it to just the focus on grades and how people are graded, but given the fact that our original focus was that, or our original working knowledge was that this was a temporary thing. It's now been extended through the end of the year. And some of the models have us even planning, not planning, but realizing the possibility that this may be the new normal even in the fall. To the highest degree possible, we need to try to create a system that provides an infrastructure for education, and that's more than just grades. Because if we create a situation where anything goes or everybody gets a pass, what we're seeing is that there's uneven right now implementation of remote learning. So in some cases, you have people not assigning work because only 2 people signed up or 10 people came to Google Meet. And my argument is, if 10 kids show up, teach the 10 kids that show up. And so we are creating something, as we've always done, that is going to be flexible, complex, because we're taking in multiple views and positions where people are. But I do want to, I also want to be true to my beliefs and my philosophy around education, that we have to make sure we create the system so that we have the right checks and balances on teachers, principals, children, not just children, because when we only talk about grades, we're only talking about the check and balance on kids. There needs to be a check and balance on everybody, because this is still the school system. We are still running. All of us are still being paid to make sure that kids get an education. And I feel strongly that we have to create the right system of checks and balances. What that also affords us, which I think is the most important thing, is to truly address the most vulnerable kids. Because if we try to take a blanket approach, like we've been doing, number one, it's not sustainable. That's why we're up to $36 million on spending already. We're going to blow through everything. I would much rather have a realistic view of the students who cannot participate in remote learning because of connectivity issues, because of device issues, because of family conditions where they don't have the support to do this work, or people are working and they can't be there to walk kids through it. If we don't set up a real system that allows us that real visibility, we're just blowing in the wind. And so I just want to be clear as the leader of this organization that that's how I'm thinking about this and how I'm approaching it. But we're going to be extremely thoughtful, and we're going to put something together that is complex and meets the needs of everybody. But I also want to make sure that we're not throwing out all of the hard work that we've done to support our students and to push students who people didn't believe could perform to do great things. We're not throwing that out because of COVID. We're going to provide the resources and the structures with the devices and the material and the curriculum, but we're also going to create checks and balances in this system so that everybody is accountable. And then when we see the students, and we know they exist, who can't access this, we will direct those additional resources to the students who truly have problems accessing this, and not just blow everything, blow all of our money trying to do everything for everybody without any kind of accountability. I don't think that makes sense. And I don't think that would be us being good stewards of the money that that we're in charge of allocating and distributing.
I appreciate you sharing that, Dr. Jackson, and to build on other board members' comments, I think it's really important for us to collectively acknowledge here how much we don't know about what the needs are going to be when we return. And so when we're talking about the policies that have implications and how we spend the money, I think it's also really imperative that we acknowledge we've never been through anything where there was some sort of natural disaster where kids weren't able to go to another system nearby that supported and educated them. This is unprecedented, that there is no safety net. And so I think really important for us collectively to acknowledge that we're not even scratching the surface of understanding what the needs are going to be when we return to school. And so I think we're all agreeing that we want to focus on the most vulnerable, but I think it's important to acknowledge we don't know, and that if we are not now starting to ask directly to the people who are being impacted what they want and what they need. And I think that has implications in how we connect with community now, not just with transparency, but asking people how they're experiencing it, what kids are going to need when they come back. So our community-based organizations, our families, our kids, and reaching out to understand that, so that when we come back, we're not taking all the information we're gathering now around policy and the checks and balances that are in place and making assumptions about what people need, that people will want, like that summer school will be the thing, that extending school day or extending the school year. I think we're seeing all over the country people rush to solutions without asking those most impacted. And I hope that we will take that approach.
And I think we don't have the luxury of time here, of course, because the end of the school year is upon us. It's not that far. So it's important that we now determine why some students are not engaging fully, or they're engaging partially, because we want all students engaged. But what is happening in the home? What is happening with the parent, the grandparent, the guardian? Where is the assistance coming from? And that information needs to be generated now. And it begins with the teacher. I mean, Dr. Jackson mentioned that a teacher should proceed with 10 students for Google Meets. If you don't have the whole entire class, you proceed with the class the students that you do have. But we need to find out why the others aren't there. And we need to find that out quickly. And teachers need to be able to get the kind of support they need in that process of determining why the student isn't engaged, so that action can be taken quickly. Dr. Jackson?
I'm sorry, was there a question?
Well, I'd like to know what are the steps we're taking when we determine now that students aren't engaged?
Oh, well, the first step was to determine engagement, which we're right in the process of doing. And so I don't want to get ahead of some training that we're going to be doing with principals towards the end of this week and early next week when we release the guidance. But to date, following the ISB guidance for engagement, we had limited that to teachers going into Aspen, our student information system, and identifying and noting that they've had contact with students. So that's what we got off the ground as of last week, and that's what we've been doing through this week. We're going to be shifting next week and making a distinction between contact and engagement, because those are two different things. Contact really is a proxy for attendance, like have we had a connection with students? I think that's one pass. And the degree to which students are engaged would really more closely align to are they attending the Google Meet sessions or the classroom sessions? Are they accessing Google Classroom and completing assignments and turning them in? Are teachers assigning work? We have new analytics now that we are collecting around whether or not work is even being assigned, much less completed by students. So earlier, the point I was making was around infrastructure. But at the end of the day, and every teacher across the city is responsible for a classroom, a homeroom at the high school level and advisory. At the very least, I don't think teachers need any direction from us or any additional support to reach out to every single one of their students. And so and I know a lot of schools are doing this, where teachers are, in addition to assigning work, they're hosting, meetups with kids to talk about how they're experiencing COVID, challenges that they may have. A lot of the challenges are referred to our hotline, which we think is a good system. So we see some triangulation there. But I think the first thing is contact. There's nothing precluding teachers from contacting all of their students right now. And I would say that's the first order of business. Any student that is not participating in remote learning, just as you would as a classroom teacher, if a kid isn't coming to school, the first step is to contact the home. LaTanya, I don't know if you want to add more. But like I said, along with our grading guidance that we're putting out, there's going to be more guidance with principals and network chiefs that are going to be coming out soon. And so I don't want to get ahead of that training.
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything that you said. I think you covered it very well. The goal would be to capture data that will inform us in terms of how teachers are engaging, how students are engaging, really defining what engagement is, as Dr. Jackson talked about, and going a little bit step further in terms of work that's being assigned and how students are doing with remote learning, with the assignments that are being completed, because I think there's a lot that we can learn about those students who are engaging in remote learning, and engagement meaning that they're showing evidence of mastery of certain standards, concepts that may have been covered, as well as those who are engaging but not, but showing that they need additional support because maybe what's being provided doesn't work in a remote learning setting. So I think there's a lot that we can glean from the data that we capture, whether it be by graded student work or by captures around engagement for both teachers and students from data analytics using the platforms that we're using in the district. Either way, we need to learn what makes remote learning work and where there's room and opportunity for us to continue to improve, because this is all new. And with not knowing how long this might extend, in some ways, remote learning may never even really go away. We'll continue to be doing remote learning in some form or fashion, even when upon return to school. So I think we do need to capture data to figure out how we do this well, what doesn't work, what does work, what do we need to stop, start, continue. And the only way that we can do that is by getting a good capture of not only what students are learning, but what teachers are providing and how that's functioning across the district in different spaces and in different communities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? If not, we'll proceed with the vote on public agenda items. Madam Secretary, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will begin with items on the public agenda, read the board report numbers and brief titles. I will begin with a resolution and a policy, and these items do require a vote. The first report is RS1. This is the resolution for the appointment of LSC members. And PO1 is to rescind the current Freedom of Information Act policy and adopt a new Freedom of Information Act policy. Mr. President, these items do require a vote.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. I'll proceed with a roll call. Member Sotelo?
Yes.
Member Truss?
Yes.
Member Tad Breland?
Yes.
Vice President Reveluri?
Yes.
Member Melendez,
Yes.
Member Rome,
Yes.
and President Del Valle.
Yes.
We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. These actions are adopted by the board. I will proceed, Mr. President, with items on the agenda that require a vote. We have EX1, which is a transfer of funds. EX2 is the amendment for the Foundations College Preparatory Charter School Agreement. And this amendment is to authorize the termination of the existing charter school agreement with Foundations College Prep at the end of the 2019-2020 school year by mutual consent of the parties. EX3, Mr. President, is the amendment for the charter school agreement with Chicago Collegiate Charter School. This amendment is to remove grade 4 from the grades served at Chicago Collegiate Charter School beginning in the fall of 2020. And for the record, Mr. President, I would like to note an abstention for Board Member Todd Breland on EX3 for Chicago Collegiate. I'll continue with the additional items on the public agenda that require a vote. We have PR1. This is to authorize the second and final renewal agreement with the Illinois Institute of Technology. PR2 is to authorize the first renewal agreements for various vendors for social and emotional learning. We then have PR3, first renewal with vendors for the purchase of educational supplies. PR4 is to authorize the second and final renewal with Illinois Action for Children. PR5 is to authorize new agreements with various vendors for the purchase of musical instruments. PR6 is to authorize the first and second renewal agreements with eBuilder. We then have PR7, which is the report of the award of construction contracts regarding the capital improvement program. PR8 is to authorize the second and final renewal agreements for vendors for the safe passage services. PR9 is to authorize the first and second renewal agreements with Omicron. PR10 is to authorize the extension of the agreement with Kronos Incorporated. PR11 is to authorize the first and second agreement with Davis Bancorp. PR12 is to authorize the first renewal agreement with Blackboard Inc. PR13 is to authorize the second and final renewal agreements for vendors for the purchase of and/or lease of network servers. PR14 is to authorize the second and third renewal agreements with Frontline Technologies Group. And PR15 to authorize new agreement with People Element LLC. And Mr. President, these items do require a vote.
If there are no objections, please apply the last favorable roll call vote with the noted abstention.
Thank you, Mr. President. So noted. I will continue with additional items on the public agenda, Mr. President, that do not require a vote. FN1 is the Chief Financial Officer report for March 17th through 2020 to April 10th, 2020, on the emergency authority exercised under Resolution 200325 RS1. PR16 is the Chief Procurement Officer report for February 2020 on the delegated authority. EX4 is the report on principal contracts new. EX5 is the report on principal contracts for renewals. And then we have AR1 for the board report rescissions. And Mr. President, these items just need to be accepted by the board.
Please mark received and filed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So noted.
We will now proceed with the vote on executive session items. Madam Secretary, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will continue with executive session items from the General Counsel, and I will begin with an attorney appointment. This item does require a vote. Transfer and appoint Senior Assistant General Counsel, Department of Law, Jennifer Chan. Mr. President, this item does require a vote.
Your motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. I'll proceed with a roll call. Member Sotelo? Member Sotelo? Thank you. Member Truss?
Yes.
Member Tad Breland?
Yes.
Vice President Reveluri?
Yes.
Member Melendez?
Yes.
Member Rome?
Yes.
President Del Valle?
Yes.
We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. This matter is adopted by the board. Mr. President, I will continue with a council retention and settlements, and these items do require a vote. Under council retention, authorize continued retention of the law firm The Delgado Law Group LLC, and the settlements. First report, workers' compensation payment for lump sum settlement for Nydia Alvarez, case numbers 98 WC 20604 and 03 WC 14002. The second report is workers' compensation payment for lump sum settlement for Sherilyn Bivens, case numbers 12 WC 30037, 15 WC 1673, and 15 WC 1674. The third report is workers' compensation payment for lump sum settlement for Rashida Garrett, case number 19 WC 11677. The fourth report is workers' compensation payment for lump sum settlement for John Gynam, case number 13 WC 10464. The fifth report is to amend Board Report 150624 AR4, workers' compensation payment for lump sum settlement for Ronald Polanesiak, case numbers 07 WC 1761, 08 WC 51314, 09 WC 27580, 10 WC 10 WC 40302, and 13 WC 6422. And the sixth report is to approve settlement of Latarsha Bradford Barber, tenured teacher dismissal case. And Mr. President, these items do require a vote.
If there are no objections from my fellow board members, please apply the last favorable roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. So noted. I will continue with items from the Chief Executive Officer, and these items do require a vote. Under talent recommendations, we have approve appointment of Chief Officer of Early Childhood Education effective May 18, 2020 for Brian Stokes II. I'll continue with principal contracts. The first report is report on principal contract for new ALSC for Anna Reese at DeVry High School. The second report is report on principal contracts for renewal ALSCs for Aaron Ralpher at Marine Leadership at Ames High School. Continue with an other matter for non-resident tuition. We have adopt finding that pupils are non-residents of the city of Chicago indebted to the Chicago Public Schools for non-resident tuition. Moving on to one warning resolution. Warning resolution, Dana Bloomberg, tenured teacher assigned to Christian Ebinger Elementary School. And Mr. President, these items do require a vote.
If there are no objections from my fellow board members, please apply the last favorable roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. So noted. I'll continue with an item from the board, Mr. President, and this item does require a vote. This is the resolution by the Board of Education of the City of Chicago regarding the dismissal of Daryl Brown, tenured teacher assigned to William Rainey Harper High School. And for the record, Mr. President, I would like to note that this report also adopts a supplemental opinion order under separate cover. And Mr. President, these items do require a vote.
If there are no objections from my fellow board members, please apply the last favorable roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I believe that Vice President Rivelluri has a motion, please.
I move that the record of proceedings of the regular board meeting of March 25th, 2020, prepared by the board secretary, be approved, and that such records of proceedings be posted on the Chicago Board of Education website in accordance with section 2.06B of the Open Meetings Act.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. I'll proceed with a roll call. Member Sotelo?
Yes.
Member Truss?
Yes.
Member Tad Breland?
Yes.
Vice President Rivelluri?
Yes.
Member Melendez?
Yes.
Member Rome?
Yes.
And President Del Valle?
Yes.
We have 7 ayes and 0 nays. This motion is adopted by the board. And Mr. President, there are no further items on the executive agenda.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank all the board members. I don't think I do this enough for all the hours that you spend in briefings and in reviewing the mountains of paper and material that we get online. from the board staff. And again, I want to thank all the administrators, beginning with Dr. Jackson and everyone working with her, who are working very hard to get us all through this difficult period. I don't have words to express what we're going through, because this is all totally new to all of us. But I want to thank the parents and the students and the families and the communities that are trying their best, I'm sure, to make sure that that we continue to put the best interests of our students ahead of everything else, and that we do the best we can to get through, again, this very difficult time. So once again, thank you. And do we have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes.
Good to see you, even if virtually.
Yes.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
He did the gavel for me.
Yes.
Remember,
I'll go through my emails.